Well, good evening, folks. If I can call this meeting to order. Now, we have a few agendas we're going to be following this evening. The first agenda is going to be our special meeting of council, and that is an application for zoning bylaw amendment, Department of Planning and Development Services, report number 2014-20, and the subject is a public meeting, a proposed zoning bylaw amendment, medical marijuana production facility. That's going to be followed by our committee of the whole meeting, where we discuss and deliberate and get into a lot of the items that are in the agenda, a lot of debate, and of course with that, decisions being made, and then following that is our council agenda, which we would expect that most decisions that were made during committee of the whole would in fact be ratified. I am going to change the order of the agenda up a bit tonight because we do have some presentations to be made, and with that, I don't want these folks to be sitting here all night waiting for their presentations to be made, so I'm going to switch it up a bit. But the first order of business is to welcome a special individual here this evening. We have in our midst this evening a former Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable John Turner. Mr. Turner, welcome. It's great to have you up tonight. Mr. Turner has been a close friend to the city of Port Colborne for many years, has been very close with some developments that's happened in Port Colborne, specifically Young Bunzlauer Canada. John was an integral part of that build here in Port Colborne, and as well, a lot of events that had happened after that. He frequented our community many times, many occasions, was our Grand Marshal for our Tall Ships 2001, then when we had the Tall Ships here, and came down and really spent a lot of time with the community. So once again, John, welcome. It's great to have you out tonight. It's a pleasure. It's actually an honor. With that, members of council, I'm going to start the meeting off with a prayer from Councillor Yvonne Doucette, and that's going to be followed by Mr. Joel Longfellow with the national anthem. Councillor Doucette.
Au nom du Père, du Fils, du Saint-Esprit, Amen. Seigneur, nous sommes réunis pour le bien-être de nos citoyens. Permets-nous de faire de bonnes décisions. Gardez dans nos prières les familles du vol malaisien MH370 et toute famille en douleur à cause de ces événements. Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joel. As always, well done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Much appreciated. Members of council, if I can start off with a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Kenny and Councillor Desmarais. Are there any questions or comments? With none, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. If I can now call upon Chief Tom Cartwright. Chief Cartwright. Chief Cartwright, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, senior staff, the audience, and the viewing audience. It's a pleasure to be here this evening on behalf of the City of Port Colborne and the Fire Department in particular to present some people in this community and some businesses in this community who have supported us over the last 2 or 3 years in our fire prevention, public education, and our training programs. We have some presentations to make tonight, and unfortunately we weren't able to get everybody together, so I'm going to be back, I believe it's April 14th, to hopefully do the remainder of the people in the community that have assisted us over the last few years. I'm going to ask the CAO, the Mayor, and I've got Mike Bendia with me who's going to assist me with this. I'm going to ask a representative from Frank's Home Building Center, who I think we all know who that is, Councillor Danch, to come forward. My plan is to make the presentation and then we're going to take a group photo at the front of council when all the presentations are made. So, Mr. Danch, please.
Only if you're going to say speech.
I can see who.
Thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
A representative from Oscom Steel, please. I don't know their names. I didn't get their names.
Thank you very much for your support. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Very much.
Great job.
A representative from the Carl Cahan Foundation, please.
Thanks, buddy. As usual. Thank you. Brian, thanks.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
A representative from K-Motion. Anybody here this evening? No. Port Colborne Home Hardware Building Center.
Hello, ladies. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your help.
Thanks, ladies.
Oh. We'll get this right.
This is fun. Thank you very much.
Port Colborne's Lions Club. Thanks, guys. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. We'll get you.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you again. And a representative from Simmons Auto Body. It's back there somewhere. Eno.
Come on up, you know.
Okay, thanks, Eno. There you go.
That's what you tell your wife, right, buddy? Congratulations. Definitely. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just hang in there, hang in there. If everybody wants to come back to the front of council, please, we'll get a picture of everybody together, please, and thank you. Just for the viewing audience, over the last couple of years, these businesses and or individuals have stepped forward to help us significantly with our training program in particular, and also our fire prevention program. Of course, the Lions Club over the last 12 years that I've been involved here certainly have helped us on a number of times. So come on up front, we'll get a picture with hopefully the reporter has her camera.
Place you can go to the back, Frank.
All right. Squeeze in 2 rows. Look at you guys. Take it to go there.
Put your hand on it, Lisa. Lisa, put your hand on it.
I just need everybody to take one small step. Please, your partner. Don't hide your
I won't put your hand.
All right, your side is right here. Nice big smile. One more, please,
better in your office. Donate a nail.
While the folks are leaving the chamber, I do want to, on behalf of council, express our appreciation for all the work that these many organizations do for not only the fire department, but all the local activities and initiatives that we have happening here in the city of Port Colborne. There's no question that the names that the chief had called and have presented and recognized this evening are an integral part of our community. And without your help, a lot of the things that we do here in Port Colborne just wouldn't be successful if not for your participation. So I thank each and every one of you. And even you, Doug.
Mr. Mayor, Carnival is the 10th to the 13th of July.
We'll be there. For the audience that are watching on COGECO, that was July 10th?
July 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th.
July 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th, Alliance Carnival this year. That's great. What kind of car are you drawing off this year, guys?
My understanding is it's another Chrysler product.
It's another Chrysler product?
Another Chrysler.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Members of council, we're now going to proceed with the public meeting under the Planning Act. I see Mr. Aquilina is at the podium, and Dan, with that, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to you, members of council, staff, and those in attendance this evening. As mentioned by the mayor, the purpose of this meeting is being held pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act. It is considered a city-initiated proposed zoning bylaw amendment that will deal with medical marijuana production facilities. I will get into the details of what we are proposing to do when I present the Planning and Development Report upcoming. Firstly, method of the meeting tonight was given in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act, subsection 12, 13, and 14, and Section 3 of Ontario Regulation 545/06. Notice of this meeting was posted at the Import News on February the 27th, and again in the Tribune, Welland Tribune, on March the 3rd. Notice was also posted on the City of Port Colborne's website, as well as we informed all individuals that sent an email to myself or any other member of council or staff requesting a notice of tonight's meeting. As well, we informed all individuals that were on a petition that was submitted by Mr. Kerry Fallon, and that is attached as an appendix to the report with approximately 70 names that were mailed out the notice of tonight's meeting. Method of the explanation of the procedure to be followed this evening, Mr. Mayor, is I will present Planning and Development Report number 2014-20. We will then open up the floor to any member of council that has any questions of clarification to myself. We will then open up the floor to if any member of the public wishes to address council. I will then give an announcement respecting written notice of passage of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. As well, I will give an explanation of future meetings to be followed after the presentation this evening, Mr. Mayor. Moving forward, Mr. Mayor, I would like to now present the proposed application. I will get into the details of what we are proposing to do. Firstly, council will recall there have been two previous reports that staff has presented that deals with the new medical marijuana production facilities that are being proposed by the federal government, that being Health Canada. The thrust of these new regulations are to actually curtail any sort of medical marijuana production facilities within private residential homes. That was the thrust of the reasons behind the amendment. Those new regulations take place on April the 1st, 2014. Interestingly to note that the regulations are to restrict any medical marijuana production facilities within individual residential homes. We just learned this past Friday that there was an injunction by a federal judge out in British Columbia that now has put a hold on any prohibition of any medical marijuana production facilities within individual residential homes. So ones that actually are in production now would continue to follow the previous regulations that were in place by Health Canada. So we are still moving forward with what we are proposing this evening. These deal with commercial production facilities. Just to be clear on that. Just to briefly outline some of the new regulations that are put in place and why they are put in place and what you have to comply with in order to receive a license from the federal government. Important to note that the municipality does not regulate through the license. The only thing the municipality can do is to put proper zoning provisions in place that would then ensure that any new production facility would comply with those zone provisions. What we are proposing to do through this amendment as well is we are looking to define a medical marijuana production facility, and we want to put in place uses, or a use that would be allowed within the rural and agricultural zone of the municipality. The new regulations are put in place. I'm just going to briefly go over those. They're important to understand. Again, it's federally regulated. But what they wanted to ensure is that there was a quality assurance person that had appropriate training, experience, and knowledge in order to produce and deal with dried marijuana. There needs to be chemical composition testing to deal with the quality assurance and quality control. There must be a designated senior person in charge of the overall management of the operation. There needs to be an ability to register clients. The production sites need restricted access to all of the activities, and importantly, any dried marijuana within the facility. The facility must be monitored 24/7 with visual monitoring systems and intrusion detection systems as well. The site perimeter must be monitored and recorded 24/7 at all times by the qualified person on site. There needs to be an air purification system to reduce any odors that may be emitted from the production facility on property. There needs to be security clearances held by all key personnel that are to be operating on site. The applicant needs to provide written notification to the City of Port Colborne, to the local police department, the Niagara Regional Police, as well as our local fire department. What the amendment proposes to do as well is, as I mentioned, to allow these in agricultural and rural zones only. The City of Port Colborne Council knows that in the future we will be dealing with our industrial zones, and we will regulate those through another amendment as well as an official plan amendment to control those regulations. The amendment also is looking to prohibit agricultural operations within the environmental protection zone of the municipality. I will go over the local regulations that are intended to be in place as before or after, I propose the definitions that need to be put in place within the zoning bylaw. If council will turn to page 26 of the report in the bottom right-hand corner, you will see two definitions. First one being a medical marijuana production facility. Is proposed that the definition would be a medical marijuana production facility means a building or a structure used for the cultivation, processing, testing, destruction, packaging, and shipping of marijuana used for the medical purposes as permitted under the federal government's Marijuana for Medical Purposes Regulation, MMPR, as amended from time to time, or any successors thereto. The second definition is a sensitive land use. I'm going to provide what the definition is, and I will explain what the purpose of those are when we talk about the zone regulations that we're looking to propose. Sensitive land use means a building, amenity area, or outdoor space where routine or normal activities occurring at a reasonable expected times would experience one or more adverse effects from contaminant discharges, fumes, odors, vibrations, sound waves, or radiation generated by nearby industrial, medical, marijuana production, transportation, or utility source. Sensitive land uses may be a part of the natural built environment. Examples may include, but are not limited to, residential uses, parks, community or daycare centers, recreational areas, medical facilities, churches, and schools. Council will recall that our city solicitor has informed us that a medical marijuana production facility is indeed an agricultural use. However, the recommendation was to put in place a definition and to actually categorize those within the rural and agricultural zones of the municipality. If council now can turn to page 30 on the bottom right-hand corner, you will see some of the new regulations that we are proposing to put in place. These being that these have to be in place before the use can be permitted within the agricultural or rural zone. You will see the minimum lot frontage for the lot must have 75 meters of frontage. The minimum lot area must be a minimum of 3 hectares in size. The maximum lot coverage for a lot that is less than 5 hectares, it'd be 30%. Lots 5 hectares to 10 hectares, 10%. Lots greater than 10 hectares, 5%. A minimum front yard setback must be 30 meters. Minimum interior side yard setback must be 15 meters. Minimum exterior side yard setback must be 30 meters. Minimum rear yard setback of 30 meters. And the minimum separation to those sensitive land uses that I just defined must be 150 meters. Those would be determined from building to the adjacent building, if there is one on that sensitive land use, or if it is a park, is going to be to the lot line. But in most cases, it's going to be building to building. There needs to be a planting strip of 1.5 meters. Outdoor storage is not permitted on the property. Visible nighttime lighting. If a building or structure consists of more than 40% glass and where artificial lighting is required, an opaque fence shall be provided and maintained adjacent to every portion of any lot line that abuts a sensitive land use. Parking, 1 space for every employee on the largest shift must be provided. The servicing requirements. Servicing for the facility shall be designed by a qualified professional, identifying the source of irrigation water, water quantities required, and the effects of same on the groundwater table and nearby wells. This time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to just briefly go over some of the comments that we have received. First, I'd just like to talk about the agencies that have commented. Our city's building division has stated that it would require a building permit under the building code for any significant renovation to the building, such as electrical, plumbing, ventilation, removal of walls, etc. The demolition or any part of the building would also be subject to a building permit. The City of Port Colborne Fire Department has stated that they support the proposed amendment, which will ensure appropriate locations for these facilities. These operations are agricultural and industrial in nature and should fall under the required zoning. Also, site plan control should be applied to these locations. And that is something that, after the zoning bylaw is contemplated by council, the next step is to ensure that site plan control is in place before any medical marijuana production facility can be in operation. Site plan control would look at details of fencing, parking, lighting, etc., planting strips. The Ministry of Transportation indicated they have really no objection. Their only comments really were to do with setbacks from the highway right-of-way, being Highway 3 or Highway 58, if there is a production facility adjacent to that. The region of Niagara has reviewed the zoning, and they really have no concerns. They're supportive. They did state that the growing of medical marijuana is considered an agricultural use by definition in the regional policy plan, and the processing and distributing of the product is supported by the region's value-added policies. Comments that have been received by the public are as follows, excuse me. First set of comments that we received was from Margaret Curtis Weaver, who resides at 1717 Fire Lane, number 2. It was a 4-page letter. I'm not going to go in verbatim of what that letter entailed, but briefly, what we highlighted in the report are those, and in the report, that letter is included. So if any member of the public would like to read that letter in its entirety, it will be there. I'll just highlight a few of the concerns that Mrs. Weaver had indicated. She's concerned that the city is not putting enough weight on the difference between growing traditional agricultural products and medical marijuana. She feels that growing marijuana is likely growing high, valuable cash money, then waving it around to someone to come and take it. She feels that there will be an overwhelming temptation for growers to cheat, that organized crime will become involved, and or thieves will target these facilities with the potential to target other homes in the surrounding area. She indicates that the requirements developed by the city should include requirements directed towards the health, safety, and security of employees. She would like to see a limit on the number of the type of buildings, and minimum distance between buildings should be separated for fire safety reasons. She made reference to the town of Fort Erie that presently requires a 70-meter setback. She wants to see the city consider the tax ramifications of the type of businesses and wonders what type of tax class this would fall under. She suggested that this also facility be subject to site plan control. She feels that strong consideration be given for pre-planning for wastewater and fertilizer runoff. She would like to see water samples being taken before the operation begins, and then follow-up samples provided to ensure water runoff limits are respected. She feels because of the unknown health ramifications which accompany the production of medical marijuana, consideration should be given to limiting the use of herbicides and pesticides, and that encouragement should be given to operations using hydroponic cultivation methods. She would like to see the requirement of air filtration systems to eliminate any potential odors. Feels that the new requirements should deal with security, lighting, fencing, and noise pollution in order to maintain the existing agricultural rural character of the area, and would like to see a separation distance between residential dwelling units and the production facility of 1/4 mile. And that she feels that medical marijuana production facilities should only be permitted in the industrial employment areas as illustrated in the official plan and located indoors, which would remove such much of the impetus of their existence in the rural or agricultural areas. The next comment we received was on March 21st from Frank Scott at 394 Pinecrest Road. This came in after our public meeting was prepared and before council. I'm not sure if all members of council have received that. Concerns that were raised dealt with setbacks. 300-meter setback should be from the nearest property residence. Should be also 1,000 meters from any public park, school, church, private parkland, or farmlands and with animals. There was concerns regarding property amenities, dealing with employee parking. On-street parking should not be permitted. Drainage from all the paved areas should meet city standards. Lighting of all paved areas should meet city standards. Off-street loading should be provided for all commercial facilities. Commercial vehicle access from the municipal roadway should meet city standards. Proper safe turnaround should be provided for all commercial vehicles. And the next set of comments dealt with the environment. Concerns about noise, emissions, air quality, odors, and water that is supplied must meet quality controls. Other comments were regards to security. The facility must meet Niagara Police servicing standards. It should be alarmed and monitored by a central station. Next set of comments dealt with fire protection. This facility should be sprinklered. Facility should be alarmed and monitored by a central station. This facility should adhere to provincial and city fire codes. Next comments dealt with employee safety and discussed comments regarding the Ministry of Labor regulations that must be adhered to. And the following set of comments dealt with city supplied service considerations. Are area roads sufficient to handle the type of volume of vehicles to service the facility? Is proper street lighting in place? Can EMS, fire, ambulance, police access the property and facility safely in a timely manner? What about the water supply? And also, what about water drainage? The last comment we received from the public was from the Niagara South Federation of Agricultural. agriculture. That was from Joe Schonberger, who is the president. Their concerns dealt with the city's proposed removal of agricultural within the environmental protection zone. There's a page of comments that have been forwarded. Again, I'm assuming council has those. If not, there will be in our recommendation report for council's consideration. But again, the concerns dealt with the removal of the proposed agricultural use within the existing environmental protection zone. Right now, it does allow agricultural uses. The proposal was to remove that. That was a concern. Mr. Mayor and members of council, that briefly goes over some of the topics of consideration. I talked about the history, talked about what we just learned on Friday that now deals with homegrown medical marijuana production facilities. We talked briefly about some of the regulations of what needs to be in place. I went over what our definitions are proposed to be, sensitive land uses and medical marijuana production facility. And I outlined what the new regulations that are proposed to be put in place in order to ensure that a medical marijuana production facility within the agricultural and rural zone has to ensure compliance with in order to actually operate. Mr. Mayor, that will conclude my public meeting report.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. We are now going to move to questions of clarification to the planning staff, members of council. Members of council, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Bodger and then Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. Just to touch on that Niagara South Federation of Agriculture request, are we going to be able to deal with that? You're saying it isn't in there tonight in the way the regulation reads, or it's there and they misunderstood the way we worded it?
Their comments, through you, Mr. Mayor, their comments dealt with what is being proposed on the zoning bylaw amendment. Right now, in the environmental protection zone, an agricultural use is a permitted use. The proposal is proposing to take that agricultural use away from the environmental protection zone. That was their concern, and absolutely we'll address that in the recommendation report, and we have an idea how to do that.
Councillor?
Okay, that's fine.
That's fine. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In reading through the report, I believe it was Thursday or Friday of last week, the Supreme Court of Canada put a stay on the transition and not being able to have home grow-ops. That came through, I believe it's Thursday or Friday of last week, which means that the transition over to strictly industrial type of production has now stopped. We can continue, they will continue to give licenses to those people, but the people that are now growing them at home legally with their license can continue on doing so. That was the ruling that came out of there. Does that mean, and some of the questions, that affects everything that we're doing, I believe, because will all of this apply to them, although they're historical? And the other question I have is, because they are historical, because they're legal grow-ops, personal legal grow-ops, are we going to have the ability to historically go back and say, yes, you've been here for this long, you've done it for this long, but now you've got to come into these rules? And I think we need to find that out before we write a final report and make a decision. I'd like Mr. Aquilina's comments on it.
Mr. Aquilina?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, the decision was dealing with grow-ops within residential dwellings. The amendment before us this evening deals with commercial, industrial scale, commercial medical marijuana production facilities in the rural and agricultural area. The decision that was put in place deals strictly with the individuals that grow it within their households. This amendment does not deal with that.
Okay. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. Dan, a couple of questions for you.
One being the site plan control with regards to the parking, to have one space per employee on the largest shift. Do we have that site plan control in other commercial or industrial sites around the city?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, we do have site plan control for commercial or industrial facilities. The site plan control that will come back to council in a different report, a different bylaw to allow or to ensure that medical marijuana production is also subject to site plan control. We have other zone provisions that talk about employees, the number. In industrial use, for example, if it's industrial in nature, it's 2 spots per 3 employees. So there is a comparison, but as we know, a medical marijuana production facility is not going to have very many employees. You're going to have an individual that's going to grow. You're going to have an individual that's going to oversee the whole operation. You're going to have an individual that may come periodically to do the quality control, the chemical testing, the testing of the crop to be sure it's okay. So I don't see a big concern with the number of employees that need to be provided on site. It'd be subject to site plan control like we do with any other commercial or industrial use.
Councilor?
Thank you, Mayor. And the second question has to do with the sensitive land use. It says that outdoor spaces where routine or normal activities occurring at reasonably expected times would experience one or more adverse effects from contaminant discharges, fumes, odors, vibrations, sound waves, or radiation generated by a nearby industrial medical marijuana production, transportation, or utility source. And I guess my question is, what systems do we have in place to measure all of those problems that may occur, especially with a medical marijuana facility?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, right now the regulations dictate that you need to have an air purification system. So there is not going to be any odors. That's why they want to ensure it. And they say if there are odors, then they can withdraw the application, the license. What we have done, what we propose to do, that 150 meter setback, we put in place, and what I likened it to, out in the agricultural and rural area, there are other agricultural uses that create odor. For example, if you have a chicken barn, that creates odor, and a minimum distance separation formula is in place to actually talk about how many chickens would be within a barn, what is the manure storage, and how you deal and how quickly you take away the storage. A comparable, and why we propose a 150 meter setback, for example, if you had a barn that held 26,000 chickens, and there are facilities in Port Colborne that actually harbor more, the setback would be 190 meters. So we proposed 150 meters of a setback to ensure if there is, because we know that things break down and there could be odors that can be emitted, we still have 150 meters of protection space from any sensitive land use. If there is a complaint, if there is a facility that meets all the regulations, they are licensed, and if they have an odor issue, then it's a quick call to the Health Canada and for their investigation and revoking of their license.
Thank you. Councilor? That's fine. Further questions or comments, members of council? None? We're not going to accept oral presentations and or questions by the public. We do have a registered. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, before, Mr. Mayor, I would like to read the following.
Go ahead.
Before we open it up. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is approved, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne to the Ontario Municipal Board. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting, or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is approved, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Dan. We are now going to open it up for oral presentations and or questions from members of the public. With that said, from Mr. Aquilina, you may want to think about speaking this evening. We do have one registered delegate, that being Mr. Kerry Fallon. Kerry, if you want to make your way up. And while you are doing that, I'm sure others may have something to say about this, and although not registered, I will accept from members of council a motion of leave to allow others to speak on this if you so choose. So with that, Mr. Fallon, welcome once again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Turner, and city staff. Is the mic on? Everybody can hear me? I brought my own water this time. Well, I have no authority on establishing these property setbacks, nor am I pretending to have that specific background. However, I do know after talking to several people that are present here tonight is where a commercial grow-op should not be located. They should not be located directly across or adjacent to residential houses that are only separated by a distance of a road allowance. They should not be located 500 meters from public parks, cemeteries, churches, schools, scouts camps. Scout camp, same as schools, but with learning in an outdoor environmental classroom. They should not be located within 150 meters from significant woodlands. What I mean by that, this property on Pinecrest, I could make a reference to a conservation authority map, but it's surrounded, all three sides are surrounded by wetlands or environmental protected land. And what I mean by significant woodlands is an area which is ecological important in terms of features such as species composition, which provides environmental and economic benefits, such as erosion prevention, hydrological and nutrient cycling, provision of clean air, and provision of wildlife habitat. So this should be included under the definition of sensitive land use that Mr. Dan had in his report, as well as the schools, the parks, etc., cemeteries. In fact, there's a catchment stream that's located in the heart of the woodland that flows directly in front of the current grow-up. And then it continues to discharge into Lake Erie. Snapping turtles, species at risk, is frequently crossing this road to continue on to their travels. So the Marijuana Medical Purposes Regulation, MMPR, for these commercial grow-ops. So as Dan mentioned in his report, restricted access areas that are controlled 24/7 with visual monitoring systems and intrusion detection system to detect unauthorized access. So site perimeter must be monitored and recorded 24/7 and the system monitored at all times by qualified personnel. So why would the MMPR place an emphasis on the security? Well, when you have a facility growing plants, it could possibly yield profits of about $1,000 per plant. And this is right from research on the websites. Currently, this facility is approximately about an acre in size. So placing a growing space of about 3 square feet per plant, which is very generous. A lot of these facilities really cramp them in, at least 1,000 or a plant per 1 square foot. So allow about a 70% growing space inside the present greenhouse. What you come up with, you get 3,000 plants at a yield of 20 grams of top growth. What they do with the other remainder, I have no idea, but there's quite a bit of plant left over. 20 grams, that's probably average 10, 30 grams maybe, depending on how you grow, humidity, fertilizer program, size of pot, everything like that. So standard per gram is $10. So after you do all the math here, what do you got? You got maybe a value of $600,000, and that's about an 8-week cycle program. So what you got to do is deduct all your production costs, taxes to government. I'm sure Health Canada will get their share here. So your profit might be about half that, $300,000. Multiply that by 6. What you got is almost just under $2 million. Now these facts might not all be quite accurate, but I'm not that far off. Health Canada estimates this year to be $1.3 billion. Tell me any bank that has that for a profit. So the street value of a mature plant and any enforcing agency can tell you this, it's about $1,000. So what's my point? My point is it's a very lucrative business with a high rate of return. Makes an attractive business to both the certified commercial grower and to the drug market on the street. What would happen if this facility expands to the maximum lot coverage like Dan referred to? If they're allowed, they're probably going to be allowed about 5 acres if they get this commercial growing license. And that's under the agricultural zoning requirements. Now, the owner made reference to a commercial operation back in July to council. We believe that this was the intent since he acquired the greenhouses. So why would he stop there? Why not keep going, right? I would. I mean, the money's there. I got a business growing, I'm going to keep growing it, and it's going to expand. I think the ministry or Health Canada says it's going to be 10 times fold within the next 5 years. So you're talking a lot of plants, a lot of money. So as I stated earlier, it's a very lucrative business with attractiveness to the criminal element. What's stopping someone to grab a cube van, slap on a UPS sticker, run inside there, snatch and grab? What do you got? Be out. Thousands of plants, thousands of dollars. And who's endangered? The staff. Life-threatening injuries? Well, in this process, sure. It's not a nice scenario. But there's always that presence of criminal activity. And then they come back and intrude nearby residents. Homes, as Margaret Weaver mentioned in her letter to the city. Is there going to be 24/7 patrol down our laneways or in our roadways? I doubt it. There was an article that was just forwarded to me, and it was just today, CBC News. Police chief down in Durham, Regional Police Chief Mike Ewells. It's about the courier trucks that come in. It doesn't take long for someone to do a little courier surveillance and figure out exactly where the location is. Wait for the truck to pull out of the lot and into the community. And then, lo and behold, they've just taken over. It's ripe for a takeover and a cargo theft of the entire truck. And that's putting the driver at risk and our community at risk. And be sure, this stuff's going to happen. It's not just if or when. It will. The report made reference that there would be a no loss of property values associated with the commercial grow-ups. When I consulted with a local real estate appraiser, they indicated there will be an impact to our property values, and not in a positive way. At this point, no one places a figure because we're just going into uncharted waters, right? But having a commercial grow up in your backyard, front yard, side yard, wherever it may be, it's a definite deterrent for potential buyers. And yet, when you contact the MPAC, about our high taxes that we pay out here, I'm sure everybody here in this room has tried, they all say this is a very desirable area. Well, it won't be anymore. Are these setbacks and planning proposals acceptable? It's definitely a step in the right direction to discourage commercial grow-ups, to set up shop in these types of areas. Currently, there are several municipalities in the country that are in the process of changing their bylaw zones. I don't know if they have them in place yet, but what some of them are doing is trying to make it, though, that they're safe and minimal impact to the public and the surrounding areas. In fact, there have been some communities that are banning all aspects of medical marijuana production. All aspects. So according to Health Canada, they awarded 12 commercial licenses so far. So will the Pinecrest be, that's 12 awarded, will our Pinecrest be the 13th, 15th, maybe the 19th awarded? I don't know, that responsibility is going to lie within you guys right here, with council members, the mayor, and our city officials. So I want to thank Dan, his staff, city plan. I know it takes a lot of work to do what they just did. You have a lot of work ahead of you. And all I can say is, as far as the community goes, I do not feel that it's a favorable location for a grow-up. So thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Members of council, any questions or comments to the presenter? With none, Mr. Fallon, thank you for your time this evening. Members of the public, are there any further questions or comments? Okay, first off, members of council, if I can have leave to accept others. Councillor Doucette, Councillor Elliott, any questions or comments to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Ma'am, if you want to come on up and state your name and your address, and the floor is all yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Nancy Meisner, 2122 Fire Lane 2.
Welcome, Nancy.
Okay. Thank you for letting me come up, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question is, if the injunction that was filed in British Columbia is specific to allowing the home grow-ops to continue, can I assume that the facility on Pinecrest, which would be a commercial grow-op, will now fall under, as of April the 1st, the Health Canada regulations? Will they be able to continue growing under their old license, or because it's a commercial grow-op, do they have to wait and get their new license?
Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, we don't have any application notice from anything on Pinecrest Road that a new medical marijuana production facility is being proposed. My understanding, the one that's on Pinecrest Road is a personal nature. So the new regulations that are in place come April the 1st deal with commercial production facilities. The one that is there now is personal. So that is under the privy of the federal government, as you just indicated. That decision was to allow that to continue. We have not received any application or notice that anything else is being proposed on Pinecrest Road.
Thank you.
Okay. Then therefore, so they continue, I understand that then. Do they have to follow the Health Canada facility, the new facility regulations? When you look at the Health Canada regulations, and it says that you have to have a structure that you can't easily gain access to, like a greenhouse, that it should have a solid wall. They recommend steel wall, steel clad. If it's a greenhouse, you have to have the screws on the inside so that you can't just unscrew the panel and gain access. So how did the new Health Canada regulations specific to the facility itself apply? Do they apply to anybody that's grandfathered in?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, the new regulations deal with commercial production facilities. And I stress that, commercial.
And a greenhouse isn't commercial? Like a whole, that's
hold on.
I'm sorry.
We can't do this. Okay, Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned, the new regulations come April 1st deal with commercial production facilities under the license through the federal government. We have no application for a commercial production facility anywhere in the municipality. No license has been granted. So what is there right now is a personal one. After April the 1st, the new regulations kick in. However, there is no license that has been granted by the federal government. In order for one to get that license for the commercial production, they have to ensure that they meet all of the regulations. So if one is there on Pinecrest Road and is personal, that can continue until the courts have ruled on the injunction. That's my understanding, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Ms.
Okay.
Meisner?
That helps. I wasn't sure if the building, some of the new stuff impacted. How do we find out if a license has been applied for? Because I'm hearing that a license application has been filed, but the city hasn't been notified yet. So how do you find out, other than you being notified? Is that the only way we can find out? That you were notified so then we know?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that the regulations state that the city, local city government, the regional police, and the fire department need to be notified. Until that is done, then we have no other information that would indicate that there's anything being proposed.
So in terms of her question, Mr. Aquilina, how would the residents then be notified?
That notice would come through the municipality. So it would be determined by the city clerk what information is then publicly released. There's protection and privacy concerns. So unfortunately, my belief, unless the federal government is going to inform anybody of what's being proposed, I would believe that information is going to be kept confidential.
Mr. Heil?
One of the problems, Your Worship, with this is that under the legislation, the location of a medical marijuana grow operation is protected under the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act. The clerk receives notice, Your Worship, of medical marijuana operations all the time. There are several and numerous in the city. She is required by law to maintain the details and location of that in secrecy. She can't reveal it. If something should come in respect of a commercial operation, it will have to be reviewed by the Freedom of Information Officer, the clerk, and probably have to be discussed with council. But I'm inclined to believe, based on current legislation, Your Worship, it will likely remain confidential so that it is not revealed.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. Ms. Meisner?
Okay, I know that on Health Canada you can get, they do have an ongoing list. They update daily when licenses have been issued. So you can get it once the license has been issued. I was just wanting to know, how do you find out if it's in process?
Mr. Heil?
Your Worship, the residential ones we're not allowed to reveal. But the commercial ones, there is a list right now on Health Canada, but the residential ones we're not supposed to reveal.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before you go, Ms. Meisner?
Yes.
Members of council, any questions or comments to the presenter? With none, thank you. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm going to come back to you last. Okay, so I see Mr. Doors over there just chomping at the bit. So Jeff, come on up. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have a letter here from my brother that I'd like to read.
If we can just have your address, Jeff?
Oh, my address is 2685 Vimy Road. Proposed zoning bylaw, medical marijuana production facility. I write as co-executor in the estate of my mother, Libby Dwar. She died January 2013. The property at 2685 Vimy Road has been owned by my parents for over 70 years. There are still some people alive who remember attending a party at Vimy Road property to celebrate my 67th birthday. The property is not solely a seasonal residence. There has been and continues to be year-long habitation there for over 30 consecutive years. I finally received the bundle of documents, including the 9-page report, prepared by the Department of Planning and Development on March 21st, 2014. That is 3 days ago. On that same day, the Federal Court of Canada, the Allard case, granted an injunction against one of the underpinnings of the new medical marijuana law, basically that those presently growing their own supply can continue to do so. This matter will remain legally unresolved for the foreseeable future. Regardless, I deal with the report as best I can. It is typical bureaucratic report, not particularly illuminating and tightly blinkered. For example, it is unclear on the face of the document if it deals only with a hypothetical notion of amending a local zoning bylaw, or rather specifically dealing with an unidentified property. Everyone seems to know where the property is. Was it inconvenient to mention that address? I quote, however, from the report itself on page 6. Although they can no longer be located within a dwelling, there is no restriction on other sites within the city. It therefore falls on the local municipality to ensure that these facilities are appropriately located to mitigate potential impacts. I do not believe this facility is appropriately located to mitigate potential impact. I have no interest, nor does my mother's estate, in the general notion of these facilities. There is, however, a legal identifiable interest in the location of a facility a few hundred meters from the family property. Marijuana is an illegal substance, and as such, the Centers for an enormous, polluting, profitable, ruthless criminal enterprise of manufacturing, distribution, and sales. Grower-ups, small and large across the country, are subject to gun battles and booby traps, violence continuously. For the same reason that bank robbers hold up banks, because that's where the money is. Why anyone would place a continuous tempting target for criminal activity across from a Boy Scout facility and a few hundred meters away from a very public, busy park is incomprehensible. There is no patina of social value to any of the new medical marijuana facilities. The people who use medical marijuana were just granted an injunction to prevent the prohibition part of the law from taking effect. The law is a bureaucratic answer to deal with a difficult problem combined with shifting accountability issue of making the industry profit-driven. The facilities are no different than any other entrepreneurial compromise. If any other commercial enterprise with a need for existence, security, protection, and a huge water needs approach the city for a location, a reasonable assumption would be that it would be directed to a commercial zone that already has good fire and water and security potential, not some quaint backwater road on an aging septic system and open ditches. There was no need to grow marijuana in greenhouses. The biggest single grow-up in Canadian history was shut down by the police in Barrie in 2010. It was in a disused Molson brewery. At least they had good plumbing. It may be more convenient to have a greenhouse or more profitable to have a greenhouse, but so what? Good public policy does not favor commercial convenience over public safety or environmental concerns. You would not locate any other pharmaceutical or chemical company or distillery or brewery near Cedar Bay or Lorraine. Why in the world is this facility with all its extra added problems treated differently? Finally, I must deal with the glib acronym NIMBY, not in my backyard. In this case, the backyard is literally true. Usually when NIMBY argument is raised, it is a two-part red herring. Firstly, to allow the listener to ignore the argument as being someone against some part of the common good, such as placing a home for addicted adolescents, or secondly, an assumption that there is something inherently wrong in wanting to preserve family and property values. There is nothing inherently wrong with protecting property values and family values. This is reflected in the zoning bylaws. There is no common good in commercial enterprise make an inherently dangerous illegal substance in a totally inappropriate location. I'd like to enter this, please. That's for my brother, Mark Dwar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dwar. Before you go anywhere, members of council, any questions or comments? With none, Mr. Dwar, thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. Members of the public, are there any further comments? Yes, sir. If you want to come on up and give your name and your address.
My name is Gary Dingman. I live at 467 Pinecrest Road, directly across from the said facility. My question is, if the facility at 462 Pinecrest Road were to apply for a commercial license, that is, as it is my view, that is their intention all the way along, after speaking to the men when they first established themselves at that location, I would like to know whether they will be grandfathered in if they were to obtain a license prior to this amendment coming to fruition, which is May 7th, I believe. Would they be subject to these bylaw amendments if they're licensed by Health Canada prior to the amendments?
Mr. Aquilino?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. If the facility or any facility in the city of Port Colborne was actually in operation, regardless of the license being issued, it has to be in full operation as a commercial medical marijuana production facility. If that is done before council's approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, then yes, it would be grandfathered in. It's based on the actual start and commencement of the production facility. It can't be based on when the application is applied for.
So if they received their commercial license prior to May 7th, they're in the clear to operate as it stands.
Mr. Aquilino?
Through Mr. Mayor, they would have to be in production. So if the license was granted, let's say on May 1st, and on May 3rd, it was in production, they would be compliant as of May 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilino.
And
Mr.
are not
Dingman?
subject to these amendments, correct?
They would not be subject, through you, Mr. Mayor, they would not be subject to these amendments. Correct. They would not be subject. They would need to be in place prior to council's passage of the bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilino. Mr. Dingman?
Couple more comments.
No problem.
Having lived across from this facility, it's been a headache. Just 3 days ago, I was chased up my driveway by their guard dog with its hair standing up on its back. That's the second time this has happened. Mr. Beggs, I don't know if he's present here, also got chased into his house by the same guard dog. It stinks like heck there. It smells like someone just dropped 1 million skunks out of the air. It's horrendous. My whole yard lights up like a Christmas tree at light. I have perpetual daylight. And it's just a nightmare, and I'm moving. Luckily, I sold my house. I sold it at a deflated value. And unfortunately, this was my dream, to live by the lake, and my dream is destroyed due to this marijuana facility. And I would just like the council to know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dingman. Thank you for your time tonight. Members of council, any questions or comments to the presenter? With none, members of the public, any further comments? Mr. Edwards, come on up. Donnie, welcome.
Thanks, Mayor. City Council, employees of the city.
Donnie, can you just give your-
2365 Fire Lane 2, Port Colborne, Ontario. Donnie Edwards is my name. I'm a practicing pharmacist in this community, and as a practicing pharmacist, I think I know a little bit about, what drugs do. In fact, I'm one of the leading experts in this province on drugs of addiction. I'm sought after as a speaker on drugs of addiction. It's very frustrating to live in a city that's considering having a pot grower in our community. I live around the corner from this establishment where I see young kids working there, high school kids. Not a place for high school kids. I have 3 kids, 3 teenage daughters living around the corner, and they know people that are working there. Not a place I want my child to work, not a place that I want your children to work. I also feel the vibrations on my deck trying to sit and enjoy a cup of coffee in the morning. The vibrations from the grow op. What I learned today is for personal use. First to admit, I like the odd beer, Canadian Pilsners, my favorite. So for my personal use, I'm thinking, wow, I guess I'm gonna have to open up a brewery on Fire Lane 2 because, boy, the size of those greenhouses, if that's for personal use, I'm gonna have to open up the size of a Molson brewery in my backyard to meet my demands, I guess. Because that makes no sense to me at all. The fact that I have customers who have come into the pharmacy and said, I'm trying to find marijuana for my medical use. I can go buy them in Port Colborne at certain establishments. That's happened. They've said that to me personally, which is alarming. As a healthcare professional in this community for over 20 years, I'm very deeply concerned, not necessarily just for the property value of these people, not necessarily for the stench, the odor that this gentleman was speaking about, or the fact that I drive down that road at night and see your lovely arena or whatever's all lit up back there. I'm not sure what it is, but there's a lot of lights there. The sounds, the smell, the traffic has changed. There's cars coming and going, not picking up tomatoes anymore this time of year, so we know that's not what's happening. It's disturbing. I just wanted to make my point known that as a healthcare professional that sits on the provincial's narcotic monitoring system working group, this is very disturbing. I think something needs to be done beyond what's recommended in these bylaws. It's still not enough. It's not enough to have this in our community. We don't want to be on some talk show, late night talk show known as Pot Colborne, and Mayor Vance being the Mayor Rob Ford of the future here. We don't need that, and we don't want that. So moving forward, I'm very interested in what the conditions are and how many plants are allowed for personal use. Because do all the regulations that you're talking about, are they meant for personal use as well or strictly industrial? Because I'm very concerned that this grow-up is not necessarily for personal use. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Members, yeah, thanks for that, by the way. I owe you. Before you go, Donnie, members of council, any questions or comments? Councilor Doucette, go ahead.
The only question I have is, I've heard it over and over again, is that the city seems to have control over licensing and having these places here. I don't know if Donnie can give us the answer, or maybe Mr. Aquilina can give us the answers, but I was under the impression we had no control over the licensing. Once they have their license, what we can do, though, is control where they can go and what they have to, the rules they have to follow, and which is what we're doing right now. But we have no control over anything else. So maybe someone can give me the answer to that, because I keep hearing that, and I don't want to have some misconceptions on that. And if we do have control, then I'd like to know.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Aquilina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the City of Port Colborne does not have any control on the license. It's a federal jurisdiction under their privy. We only can control potential locations, and that's it.
Through amendment.
Through zoning.
That's right. And this, and I just wanted to make the point too as well, that the City of Port Colborne isn't the only one dealing with this issue. It is across the region. I know the City of Niagara Falls is dealing with it right now. The City of St. Catharines is dealing with it right now, and there's a few others. So we're not alone in this whole thing here. So it's not just Port Colborne; it's other municipalities as well. Before I leave you, Don, members of council, to the presenter. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I have Councillor Butters, Councillor Kenny, and Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks for your remarks, Donnie. I do appreciate them. What you didn't come out and say was that you would like to see this banned from the City of Port Colborne, but that's kind of the drift that I get. So assuming that that's correct,
That's correct.
Mr. Aquilina or CA Ohio comment on whether we have the right to ban and how, if that's even anything on the table, because we might as well just know what the answer to that is.
Mr. Howe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship, this is legislation beyond municipal jurisdiction, and I suppose the answer is the 3 windmill towers that were banned in Wainfleet. They went there. This is federal legislation. The federal legislation, as we understand it, says that council will be able to determine the uses within the agricultural zones, setbacks, side yards, those kinds of things that are proposed in this bylaw. I'm not going to offer a legal opinion, Your Worship, but based on what I know from federal and provincial law, you can't prohibit, but you can regulate. But you can't prohibit by regulation. It will always be subject to a test of reasonableness. We've reviewed the bylaw, and it's going to be up to you to determine if the provisions in the bylaw are reasonable, and this doesn't apply to that existing use, that existing one that's there. This is anything new.
Okay. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Donnie. Donnie, you mentioned in your presentation that you know of students who are employed there. I guess my question would be, Mr. Aquilina, if this is a private or personal use, how does that personal use allow employees if Mr. Edwards is right in his...
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor, I am not aware of the details of the actual licensed premises on Pinecrest Road, what regulations the federal government has in place of what employees are there. I only could speak to what the regulations will say come April the 1st. And every employee has to be cleared and they have to be qualified. It's a different game come April 1st.
Thank you. That's fine. Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question isn't specifically to the presenter, but certainly the presenter could weigh in on this considering your expertise. My question is to try to find some kind of relief from the people sitting here, for the people sitting here tonight. This is a personal use growing facility right now. If it's a personal use growing facility, I don't know how that would generate employment for people, number one. Because to me, personal use would mean you have a home, you grow enough for your own personal use. This sounds like greenhouses and multiple plants involved. That's way more than personal use. Where is our licensing in this? This isn't part of federal regulation. This is personal use. How do those people right now get licenses for medical marijuana? And if so, you know, we need to know that. We need to know where our city comes in to go in and do any kind of inspection, any kind of regulation as to how that's being applied. Because personal use, 1 or 2 plants I can see, maybe 3 plants, I don't know. But this sounds like greenhouses full, and that's way more than personal use.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'd like to hear how that goes.
Through Mr. Mayor, as council is aware, our legal counsel has weighed in on this. Medical marijuana production is considered an agricultural use as is right now. Legal counsel has recommended that we put in place provisions to control future production facilities, commercial.
Site plan.
And through site plan control after.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you, and I do understand that, but how does the licensing get applied right now? The new regulations are not in place yet. We're still working under the old system where people are granted the ability to grow for personal use, medical marijuana in their home. This is taken into, so this is a commercial setting. This is not a home setting. So are we in a limbo where the laws are just being suspended? I don't understand.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, my understanding, the license that has been granted by the federal government is for a personal business, personal use only. So I can't comment what the details of their license application or approval is right now. City of Port Colborne is not privy to that information.
Just if I can weigh in, what we're dealing with right here is post April 1st.
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
And of course, the bylaw, the zoning bylaw amendment would then take precedent. And with that, attached to the zoning bylaw amendment is the site plan control. And that's what's being offered here this evening. Correct, Mr.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Dealing with commercial, industrial, medical marijuana production facilities only, because that's what the new regulations dictate.
And just going to the councillor's question, anything happening now with respect to the operation, has there been any dialogue, any indication, any controls that are available for the city to take?
Right now, Mr. Mayor, the present zoning allows for that use.
And of course, all regulations and applications are dealt with through the federal government?
The licensing requirements are a privy of the federal government, that is correct. What they require, I can't comment on because it's under federal jurisdiction.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Edwards, anything you want to add?
I'm just interested if there's any interest in bylaws on personal use, then on the amount of plants, the size of the property, the amount of the number of greenhouses that are growing that for personal use. Is there a limit?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, our present zoning bylaw has controls with regard to setbacks in industrial zones in the city, both rural and industrial and agricultural. It would be subject to what the setback provisions are within our existing bylaw as it is today.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Doucette?
Maybe to help out, I don't know. The one day when that individual came in here and explained it to us, I believe that was in the spring, he indicated that he essentially has all the individuals that are growing their personal stuff there have their license. What he does essentially is he rents a space for them to grow their individuals. So every individual that is growing a plant or 3 plants or 4 plants, whatever it is, has a right and has the license. He has the license on site, but there may be 20 of them growing in that particular greenhouse. So that's how it's for personal use. There are 20 licenses and 20 individuals, and he rents space out to them to allow them, to give them a place to grow it. And if I remember right, when he came in, that's what he indicated. Ron, is that?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Councillor. So if I may, so we don't get off track here, we are dealing with a zoning bylaw amendment that is going to deal with an industrial use. The current use is regulated by Health Canada, by the government, federal government, and of course, as was alluded to by Mr. Aquilina, we have no jurisdiction over. So, however, no sense trying to guess, because that's not what we're dealing with tonight. We're dealing with a zoning bylaw amendment having to do with industrial use of a medical marijuana operation. Councillor Bodnar. Okay. Any further questions or comments to the presenter? Mr. Edwards?
I'd just like to make one last comment then. If you're leasing space to grow, is that not a business?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, we would have to look into the details of it, but it's for personal use. So if I had a property that I have a greenhouse operation, Mr. Mayor, if I had a greenhouse operation and if I want to lease that out, I don't know if there's any money being exchanged. It could be something that we can look into, but it is right now considered a personal license by the federal government.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Donnie, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time this evening. Sir, come on up.
My name is Tom Schroeder. I live at 2407 Fire Lane 2. I'm glad that the last comment was just made about large operations being assembled from small permits by multiple people, because that's my understanding of how that facility is operating now, that there are multiple individuals who have licenses to grow, and they have transferred their license, physically walked it down there and provided it in a single place. And it does seem to me that there's a difference between what we're objecting to that's already there and what we are hoping to prevent from being there later. So I'd like to move on to the question of what would we like to prevent from being there later, rather than arguing about whether they have the right to assemble their licenses and do all the things that they're doing. So my question would be, given the proposed setbacks and parking requirements and lighting and so forth that's in the proposed bylaw, would the current greenhouse in its present position be legal according to the new rules? Because I don't exactly know about all the setbacks. I know there are some 150-meter setbacks, some 30-meter setbacks, and so forth. But in any case, I would encourage the bylaw to be written in such a way that that greenhouse is too close to parks, cemeteries, Boy Scout camps, residential properties to be on that site. And I'd like to know whether the current greenhouse would actually be legal under the new regulations.
Thank you. Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, and again, just to stress, the zoning amendment before us this evening is dealing with the rural and agricultural zones of the municipality. It is not dealing with any specific property within the city. If you were to look at that individual property, however, it would not meet the 150-meter proposed setback that is required.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina.
From a sensitive land use.
And that includes residential.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. I see somebody back there. Come on up.
Hi, don't go too far. I got a question for you. Hi, Richard Holliday, 2366 Fire Lane 2. You just mentioned the use there now has nothing to do with the new bylaw that you're amending. That's what you just said, correctly?
Through Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Aquilina, if we can have you come over here,
Sure.
that would be great. And sir, if you can speak through the chair.
Sure.
And we'll deal with it.
Yeah, this new amendment, what exactly is this new amendment going to do? If the place that's in place there is functioning, do they need this new amendment to the bylaw to continue?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, as stated before, the amendment deals with the agricultural and rural zones of the municipality. If any property in the city of Port Colborne is being proposed for a commercial medical marijuana facility, it needs to comply with what's before us this evening, all of the zone provisions. it needs to be in place, up and running before the zoning comes into effect. So if there's a facility out there that's being proposed, and if they get that licensed by the federal government, and they're now in operation before the zoning bylaw, before council this evening takes effect, then they would be considered permitted under the grandfathering.
Okay.
And if they're not?
And if they're not, they have to ensure compliance with what council has in place when that comes into effect.
Thank you.
I got one more question. So what started this amendment to the bylaw in the first place? I don't get it.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, we took the bull by the horns and put together the provisions because we knew they would come into effect April the 1st. It's no secret there's been a lot of interest, a lot of concern out in the municipality, so we brought forward the proposed amendments for council's consideration.
And to deal with the site plan as well.
And to have the site plan in effect, subject to site plan to have that in place.
Right.
So you've actually prepared for something in the future, obviously.
Mr. Aquilina?
Correct?
Correct, Mr. Mayor. If a new development is being proposed, it needs to be subject to site plan control. A formal agreement has to be in place to ensure that every amenity space on the property complies with the zoning, and we could deal with different matters that deal with actually having to pave surface, putting in proper landscaping buffers, planting strips, the whole 9 yards.
Versus having to deal with it at a later date.
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
One more little question. You mentioned earlier something about industrial. Now, at some point in time, do these things have to be, the bylaw changed to an industrial site?
Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, to you, what we will propose, as was indicated before to council in a previous report, we will then engage the planning process to amend both the official plan and the zoning bylaw to deal with medical marijuana production facilities in the industrial zones. Right now, our legal counsel is informing us that let's deal with the proposed definition and have that regulated as well in the rural and agricultural zone, because that's what it is, considered an agricultural use. In the future, we will have a new amendment, a new planning process, public meeting, the whole bit that will deal with these facilities within our industrial areas of the municipality.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, meaning these would have to be changed to industrial lands?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, they would have, if one was proposed in the city of Port Colborne, they'd have two or three choices. It's either on agricultural and rural lands, if those are in place based on what council has this evening. Let's look after that. If one was being proposed in the industrial area, council will then also have a whole suite of provisions that would be required before that facility could be located in the industrial area of the municipality.
Mr. Howe?
Thank you.
Your Worship, just to kind of clarify a little bit about the question of commercial industrial, it is commercial industrial as opposed to residential. It doesn't mean it's a commercial use or an industrial use. It's licensed by the federal government, intended to be licensed as a commercial or industrial entity. It is an agricultural use, according to our legal advisors. It's a commercial industrial use and not residential. It's not a commercial use like you see downtown or industrial use in the industrial park. It's just simply referred to as a non-residential license. It's a commercial industrial license is what the regulation is saying, but it is in fact an agricultural use. And it is referred to as commercial industrial only to clarify the licensing that the federal government will be issuing, as opposed to a residential license, which was supposed to be curtailed and stopped, subject except for the injunction that was created last week.
If I can add a bit more clarification to this as well. And as I said when Mr. Edwards was up here, this is not something that just the city of Port Colborne is working on or is challenged with. It's many municipalities throughout Canada,
right?
Even here in Niagara. I know Niagara Falls is dealing with it. I know St. Catharines is dealing with it. The difference between them and us is that we've become proactive with respect to ensuring that because it's allowed in the agricultural zone, it's not identified within the actual zoning. So what Mr. Aquilina is trying to do here is identify it within the agricultural zone, taking into consideration the concerns that we've heard from the general public, especially those in the immediate area. So we're dealing with that right now, presently. if in fact there comes a day when they want to be in the industrial zone, what Mr. Aquilina is saying is at that time we'll deal with it. Now, we are trying to be proactive because as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, it's not identified within the industrial zone either.
Sir, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. It is not. And one of the main reasons we need the official plan amendment, it deals with cultivation, which generally is an agricultural use. We need to have those policies changed to recognize the cultivation, which is normally agricultural, can also be considered industrial because there are different components of that production facility that are in fact industrial.
So what we're trying to do here is take into consideration what we've heard from members of the immediate as well as general public. What we want to do is be proactive versus having to react to it. We're trying to be proactive, taking into consideration the concerns, hence the reason why we're putting site plan control on it with respect to setbacks and buffering and things of that nature. And then therefore, if in fact an application is made to locate in an ag zone, an agricultural zone, we'll already have in place not only the bylaw amendment, but more importantly, it being identified within that current zoning. And of course, with that said, having site plan controls that take into consideration the concerns of the public. The next step now is to also do that in the industrial area, and as Dan said, is to then amend the overall official plan. As Councillor Doucette alluded to earlier, this is not something that we can ban, that we can control, although it may in fact be the desire of council to do so, we just don't have that authority or jurisdiction. However, the jurisdiction and authority that we do have is to ensure that wherever it does go in the municipality, that it goes there in a most appropriate manner. Taking into consideration, of course, the concerns of the general public.
Okay, one more question while I'm up here. As far as the Province of Ontario Land Use Act goes, have they been involved in any of this decision-making about that particular land?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, they're not. They have not been. The Planning Act is silent on medical marijuana production facilities. Again, it's a federal land use, federal jurisdiction. So Province of Ontario has remained silent.
But they could do something or say something?
Mr.
If they were...
Through Mr. Mayor, the Province of Ontario can be engaged in any way they want to do with regard to land use planning. At this moment, they have not come out as a province and said anything otherwise.
Okay, thanks a million.
Thank you. Actually, I think that's a great point. You know, through the Planning Act and of course the Ministry of Natural Resources and other ministries, I'm quite frankly shocked that they haven't made any comment and or any, I guess for lack of a better word, recommendation. So, okay, I've seen a few other hands go up. If I could go, somebody else have their hand up over here that hasn't spoken? Yeah. Oh, sir, come on up, and then I'm going to go back to you, sir, and then we're going to finish it off with the proponent. Sir, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Chuck Groom, 2400 Fire Lane 2. I guess my question is, how many of you people are growing crops out there? How many of you are paying residential taxes? My question is, as far as I can see, there are about three people that are, how did this area get zoned? How do you get zoned agricultural? What has to be happening to the land for it to be zoned that? Because as of right now, there isn't anybody growing anything out there. There's a lot of people who are living there in very nice houses, paying a lot of money in taxes, and all of a sudden, it's changing. Now, it's not the mill that's doing it, and it's not that guy who lives behind the Reeve house who's doing it, but something's going on. So here's the question. How do we get rezoned to residential?
Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, this dates back to the region's policy plan and the City of Port Colborne's official plan that was first in place in 1978 that dealt with the province's soil classification, and that's how it's determined what lands are considered to be agricultural. The region of Niagara puts in place a regional policy plan and dictates which areas of each municipality in the region should be agricultural based on that land classification, the soil qualities. We then, in fact, have that official plan needs to conform to the region. That then puts in place the zoning that is required as the next step. So since 1982, the City of Port Colborne has now a new zoning bylaw that dictates what areas of the municipality are in fact agricultural based on that land classification map that is produced by the province of Ontario and recognized by the region of Niagara.
And
Based on the soil.
And the second question you had was, how do you rezone it from ag to residential?
In order to change the classification from agricultural, the municipality can do so. It does need to conform to the region's policy plan. The region of Niagara is going to have serious concern of changing any agricultural land designations within the municipality.
And that's on behalf of the province of Ontario?
That is recognizing what the province of Ontario has in place as well.
Thank you. Sir?
We live on sand dunes. I don't know how that could be zoned agricultural.
Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, the sand dunes, in fact, along the Lake Erie shoreline are actually zoned hazard land, and some of those areas are zoned lakeshore protection. As many of members of council know, there's a lot of cash cropping that takes place in the city of Port Colborne. So,
But I think what has to be recognized here is that the agricultural zone isn't a blanket zone for the entire area. It's per property. And a lot of it has to do with traditional uses, it being a farm. For example, where you live, it would be zoned residential. And parts of your property may in fact be zoned, as Dan alluded to, environmental protection because of the sand dunes. But other pieces of property, such as this particular piece of property, is zoned agricultural. So it's not a blanket agricultural zone for all of you. It's just that specific piece of property that's zoned agricultural.
I can understand that. I guess what I look at is that basically there are a whole bunch of people here who are very unhappy with this. And everything I've heard says that it's a federal issue, it's a this. From what I understood, individual grow-ops were to be held in the person's residence. That's what the court decided. Those were allowed to maintain their production as they had done before. This is not in a house. The other problem, I think, is at this point, if this town council's only opportunity is to do something about rezoning, then at least we could make an application to somebody to do that. That would be some kind of an action that might be positive and forthcoming. And I do want to say I was very, very pleased to read the amendments. I was very, very happy to see that you were trying to do something in that direction. At this particular point, it doesn't sound like it's going to work because this is a prior operation. They can continue to do what they're doing because of this judgment out in Vancouver. It still comes down to it. If we need to be rezoned, I'm imagining that we could get a petition saying we would like something, and maybe we can't do it. But at this point, I don't want to live on a farm.
Mr. Aquilina, any comment?
Mr. Mayor, the official plan designates a lot of land in the municipality that's outside our urban area boundary as agricultural or rural. There's a lot of land to the north, and I don't want to hone in on what we've been talking about this evening. However, a lot of the land in the surrounding area is in fact designated as agricultural. All the way up through Pinecrest Road, there's some non-farm residential zones on that property. To the south along the Lake Erie shoreline, it's lakeshore residential, but it's outside our urban area boundary. There are not many options that the municipality has because it will not conform to the region's policy plan. It needs to conform to that. If we're going to look at putting in place certain zoning provisions or restrictions that would not comply with our official plan nor the region's policy plan, and in fact the places to grow, the provincial policies, and I would not recommend council doing that.
Did we not try to do that years ago where we tried to take a lot of those lands south of Highway 3 and in fact zone them under rural so that in fact it would be a lot easier to go from rural to residential versus ag to residential?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. In 2006, when council first adopted the official plan, the region of Niagara and the province of Ontario were all over that, and it was something that it was a losing battle because it did not comply both with the region's policy plan nor did it comply with the growth plan. So it would not be recommended council to go down that road because if there's an appeal, it's a losing battle.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Members of council, any questions or comments to the presenter? With none?
You too, Barb.
Sir, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for your time tonight. Members of the public. Oh, sir, come on back up. Come on back up.
Frank Scott, 394 Pinecrest Road. Mr. Mayor, if Mr. Schroeder's question regarding the bylaw amendment and the answer he received regarding the said property If the said property doesn't fit the bylaw amendment, then we shouldn't be arguing or discussing it any further. We should really be passing the bylaw amendment tonight. Not that we could, but if it was passed tonight, then we wouldn't have to worry about a license being issued later on. If the property does not fit the bylaw amendment, then what is the delay?
Mr. Mayor,
A comment.
what we would need to do is a recommendation report would need to come back to council for consideration. Once council makes that decision, then there's a 20-day appeal period. My intention, I was going to discuss it, further into the agenda under future reports. My intention was to have the next recommendation report before council the next public meeting in the 1st of April, the 12th or 14th.
And just to clarify, this evening's public hearing under the Planning Act is just that. It's a hearing under the Planning Act. After tonight, we hear from you, we hear from the proponent, as well as clarify any questions or comments council may have. And then the following meeting, as Dan alluded to, will then come back with a report from him that contains the information within this hearing report. And of course, council will then deliberate it and either move forward with it or not.
That I understand. My concern is we're beating around the bush, really. We keep getting sidetracked as to what is there today versus what will be there tomorrow. Again, the comment is, with the way the bylaw amendment is written now, if it was passed the way it is, that property would not be under the new guidelines.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, as I indicated earlier, it would need to ensure that all the provisions that are being proposed are in compliance. If a greenhouse, if a medical marijuana production facility was 150 meters away from a sensitive land use on that property, it's a rather large property, and it met all the other provisions, then it would indeed comply, subject to us executing a site plan agreement. So I don't want to make the comment that that property could not comply. I believe that one of the existing greenhouses that are on the property would not comply. But that doesn't mean that the property can't comply if something is proposed in the future.
No, as it sits today, though, it would not comply.
Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Would not comply.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further comments or questions? Carrie, come on back up. And then we're going to end off with the proponent.
I figured I started off, so I'll end it, I guess, huh? Just one simple question. Has Health Canada, have you forwarded the package, your submission for our amendments to Health Canada?
Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, the Health Canada is not interested in what the City of Port Colborne is proposing. They have their own regulations in place that dictate what you need to have before you get a license from them.
Okay.
So we can't be proactive and send communication out?
The simple answer is yes, we can.
What?
Now, what they do with it is up to them, but we can send it off to them.
You can send it off.
Yeah.
Everything helps.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that, Dan?
It's the direction of council. If council would like us to forward anything off to Health Canada, whatever is the pleasure of council, and we'll follow council's direction.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Sir, you're up.
Thank you. Your Worship, and through you to council.
You can just have your name. And
Yeah, I will. My name is Mark Keeley, and Your Worship, I'm the president and a shareholder in Moolaboom Organics Incorporated. If I can, Moolaboom Organics Incorporated is a registered Canadian corporation. Our head office, or our corporate commercial office, is in Mississauga, Ontario. And I'm here tonight to speak on the facility that we're proposing for an MMPR, under the MMPR, a license to grow medical marijuana. At the outset, Your Worship, I'd like to offer this as context. In 2005, the Government of Canada decided that they would, through an act of Parliament, decriminalize marijuana. Now, I don't partake in marijuana. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't take any pills or anything of that nature. And I don't prejudge the motivation behind decriminalizing marijuana, except that it was a precursor for the MMAR. and decided those individuals who had a license to grow marijuana for personal use could get access to that license and grow medical marijuana for their own personal use. That was a precursor to the MMPR, which is passed last June by the Government of Canada by an Act of Parliament. Those regulations provide that corporations in Canada be given an opportunity to grow legally medical marijuana for the purposes of those who have a prescription to partake of medical marijuana. I say that because I think it's very important that this is put in context with respect to a decision that you as council have to make with respect to your bylaw. And I want to say through you, Mr. Mayor, that I'm very encouraged by this. I think it's important that you go down this path. I think it's important that those who aspire to be proud, like we are at Mooloboom Organics, to want to partake in a license of this nature, I would say, to force a road where there will only be 50 licenses of this variety in the entire country, which would fundamentally change the fabric of law enforcement, for probity, for those who would get involved in this. So I use that as context, Your Worship. And I'd say to you that Mooloboom Organics, Inc. is taking very seriously and very proud of the fact that we're going down this path. More importantly, I would say, Your Worship, that those of us who are involved, and we have a corporate head office with a chief financial officer, corporate legal counsel, we have a professional executive team, and we have standard operating procedures, I would suggest to you, sir, and to council, that are probably right now the envy of this entire country. We have spent a lot of time on standard operating procedures for our facility when it's licensed, Your Worship and Council, that we think would make it the envy of this country. So I look at that as, again, as further context to what we've done. And I can say to you, Your Worship, and to you on Council, that about 3 weeks ago, we provided a letter to yourself, sir, as the mayor of this city and the chair of this council, and to the fire chief in this city, and to the Niagara Regional Police of our intention to go down this path. We have since been involved with probity at the RCMP, and anybody who's involved with our organization has undertaken and submitted and committed to partaking in probity by the RCMP. More importantly, we've had very lengthy discussions with the Niagara Regional Police, to wit Detective Sergeant Lou Greco, who he and I have been talking quite regularly, and we had given him and his team in the Niagara Region Police an invitation to come to the site to view it as it's going through its readying for licensure under the MMPR. I say that too as further context, Your Worship, because we think, I really firmly believe that this is the right way for you folks to go in terms of making amendments to your city to house this kind of a facility. We have put our aspirations to Health Canada. They're it's a very lengthy document, about 700 pages, and in it we talk about our aspirations for the future growing of medical marijuana, and we happen to be domiciled here in the city of Port Colborne. The site that I'm referring to is obviously 462 Pinecrest. In terms of, and I don't want to speak to any of the the comments that were previous, I want to talk specifically to the bylaws. We would be very happy, Your Worship, through you and Council, to submit and to participate in a process that would encourage changes to your bylaws, noting that we do have, in fact, the very best standard operating procedures, good agricultural processes that are being in place when we move forward. I will say that the site 462 Pinecrest has been a farm, an agricultural facility for 55 years. That we deliberately chose the name Mooloboom because it stands for quality. And anybody in this facility and anybody on this council who has ever tried a Mooloboom tomato will know that they are addictive. So I would think that we're very, very proud of the fact that we've taken that name and gone down that path with where we're at right now. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew, Mr. Mayor, and you knew Council, that we were very proud of what we're doing, very proud of the fact that we're here located in Port Colborne. It could be, like I say, a hub for the country. It could be a hub for this region in terms of the quality of the product that we purport to plan to grow. And we look forward to your deliberations, sir, and council, when you make your decision on your amendments to your bylaw.
Thank you. Any questions or comments to the presenter? Councillor Bodner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter, I applaud you for your, your talking about quality and, and what you're going to produce. I guess what I would like to know, and the people sitting here would like to know, is that the facility you have there right now, is that the facility you're going to be using as you move forward, or are you thinking of building another facility that can actually capture some of the smells and problems anticipated and that people are going through right now?
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Keeley.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, Councillor Bodner, that's a great question. And I think, as I said earlier on, our aspirations are to grow a facility that would obviously, right now, this facility is licensed under the MMAR, which is really none of our business as Mullaboom Organics, with 4 licenses. And those 4 licenses, just so we all know, and the context too, is that an individual who has a prescription for medical marijuana is allowed, and those who are experts would tell you that it's 5 grams per day. So when you think about that in the context of the amount of medical marijuana that would be required to grow, that's how much under those 4 licenses you would see on the current facility. Under our aspirations to grow, we have submitted to Health Canada an application that would see somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,500 kilos per year, which would be probably around 1,300 licenses, or 1,300 prescriptions, I beg your pardon. So from that perspective, obviously, we're looking at growing the facility. So under compliance to the amendments that are being proposed, then obviously that would mean that we would have to grow a larger facility. So that's something that we're obviously looking at. There is a large amount of interest from individuals who are looking to invest in these kinds of operations throughout this country. I can tell you that we're very, very proud of the fact that we have on our medical advisory staff the foremost expert in the country on pain management, Dr. Rothbart. We also have an advisor by the name of Kashid, whom I believe you met, Mr. Mayor, who came here to this town, who is one of the driving forces behind decriminalizing and obviously this whole issue on the MMPR. Mr. Cash Heed, who's the former Chief of Police in Vancouver and the former Solicitor General in the province of British Columbia. The Right Honourable John Ann Turner sits on our board. I can also tell you, Your Worship and Council, that we're here in Port Colborne tonight for our board meeting of our corporation tomorrow here in Port Colborne. That's how important this is to everybody who's associated with Mullaboom Organics, not only to see the facility, but also to have our first board meeting down here. But to get back to your question directly, obviously, it would anticipate a further build-out for the size that we're looking at, and all of that would obviously be in conjunction with compliance under what this city has in place.
Councillor? That's fine. Further questions or comments to the presenter? Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming up to speak. I think that you've probably been able to see and hear all the concerns that the folks here have either written in or came up and spoke about. Mm-hmm. I think that what they need to know going forward, however this all pans out, is that your board hears that and is going to be able to deal with all of those concerns so that where they live is not going to be adversely affected, because right now they are. They're very much, and that's not, you've made it clear like that you're, that's not your, in your purview right now, because it's under the other system. But these folks here, they need to know that going forward, if you're going to set up shop and it's going to be all in compliance and whatever, that they're not going to be adversely affected. They're worried about their wells. They're worried about water. They're worried about drainage. They need that information is vital to these folks, to be able to understand exactly what you're proposing. And I think that's fair enough for them to have that information and to be able to look at it critically and say, you know what, maybe this isn't bad, maybe this is whatever, I don't know, or maybe they're still going to feel the same way, who knows. But either way, I think people have a right to know the information that they need when it affects where they live. These are their homes. They've invested all kinds of money in their homes too. And so that's what I would put to you, is that you make sure that you can be forthcoming to help set people's minds at ease, or at least give them information in which they can go forward in whatever way they see fit.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Keeley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Butters, thank you very much for your comments. I'll say this, and I think it's important that there's more context to this as well. When you submit to the process by application for Health Canada under the MMPR, it's a very rigorous process. You must demonstrate standard operating procedures. You must demonstrate good agricultural practices. You must demonstrate, I'm going to even say, good manufacturing processes as it relates to the growing of medical marijuana. I think it's important to say that it's not just willy-nilly that Health Canada is saying if you have a facility and you're growing, you therefore automatically are grandfathered, as I heard earlier on, into growing medical marijuana. Not so. I think it's important, and that your comments are taken very much to heart, that there's also a necessity, I say a necessity, for good corporate social responsibility for those who would purport to be growing medical marijuana as a business. This is a business. We have a board. Our board is obviously set up by those who have invested in this corporation and who are providing independent oversight. And you're absolutely correct. All of those issues, obviously, would be taken into account when the board is making decisions on a business level, and also with good corporate social responsibility as an aspect to it. I will say this, though. We are very much concerned about any comments that are made that would affect the impact of the environment, that would affect the impact of those who would be proximate to this facility. I will say that we have, and we probably will, satisfy every aspect of the MMPR process for application under Health Canada by virtue of what we have on the facility and what we have on site. To wit, we do not partake of municipal water. There are ponds on the site that we have actually over the last little while had forced the current production facility individuals to submit to testing. We've had Environment Canada and Environment Ontario in. We've had any number of testing procedures put in place that will be obviously made very well aware to those who would be proximate to that site. So I think we're very concerned that people would have issues with this. It's a business. I think you would appreciate that. And it is something that, of course, Health Canada and the Government of Canada is saying is going to be made available across this country. And those who would purport to be licensees or to be licensed under this would have to submit to very, very stringent environmental, corporate social responsibility issues, education of the public, et cetera, and even security issues. So we're very, very proud of the fact that those SOPs that we've put in place would stand up to scrutiny, and we'd be very happy to share those. Okay?
Thank you. Council, any further questions or comments? Councillor Bodner.
Just one more that's probably more of a suggestion than anything else. But if this is to move forward, and if this does develop into something, and I know that you have to apply, comply to all kinds of regulations and do everything right, but the average person sitting here may not have that comfort level or access to government agencies that are overseeing you, so there may be questions, there may be concerns. At some point, please give consideration to somehow setting up some kind of a
Public Liaison Committee.
Like a liaison, yeah, something like that, that I'm sure councillors in that ward would be more than happy to sit on, just so that neighbors can bring questions forward and ask, rather than going through, you know, bylaw enforcement from the city or something that may or may not have anything to do with, just to head off anything that gets blown out of proportion, so everybody's in the loop, and I just would ask that if this actually comes forward.
Thank you, Councillor.
If I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Bronner, I thank you for your comments. I can say to you that in our standard operating procedures, we do have a very strident policy and a practice to make it, to have dialogue between those who live in the community where we operate. But I can also say this to you, that if you, sir, had to submit to oversight by the former Prime Minister, John N. Turner, you know how stringent you'd have to be. And so with him on our board, we're very, very ecstatic that he's actually almost every single meeting that we have, he wants to make sure that that kind of dialogue exists between us and those with whom we're going to participate in a business in this community. So we're very, very, that's part of our SOPs as well.
Further comments or questions, members of council? With none, thank you,
Thank you very
Keeley.
much, Your Worship.
Mr. Aquilina, the floor is back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to read the following. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons and public bodies that give the clerk, a written request for the notice of the passage of the bylaw will be given such notice. In the back table there, we should have a sign-in sheet. By all means, sign that, and you will be ensured to receive the notice of council's consideration. And as well, if you provide your name and contact information, we will inform you of council's consideration date. But as I mentioned earlier, we anticipate having the recommendation report at the next council meeting. And Mr. Mayor, this does conclude the public meeting under the Planning Act. And as I mentioned, we look to have the recommendation report before council at the next council meeting in April.
Just one question, Dan. With respect to the report, when do you plan on completing that report?
The report, we need to have that report into the clerk's hands by Tuesday. I don't have my calendar.
The reason why I ask is I'm looking at getting it out to the public sooner rather than later, so they have a few days to digest it versus getting it 2 or 3 days before the meeting. Is that possible?
That's possible, Mr. Mayor. If we have that report concluded, based on all the comments that we've received this evening, we'll start on that process tomorrow.
Mr. Howe?
Your Worship, if I could kindly ask anybody that signs, if you please give us your email address and, Your Worship, the report for council. Again, in accordance with your instruction, what we will do, we will send the report to you so you have it in hand, because some of the taxpayers may call you, and you can't be blindsided. You have to know what the report says. So as soon as we get it, Your Worship, we will send it to you, and then we will try to distribute based on email. We send it by snail mail, you may never get it. That's the only thing.
Okay, so we're going to get it out to council as well as members of the public ASAP. And that way we can digest it before it comes here to the public forum. Members of council, with no further business on this item or this part of tonight's agenda, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Butters, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. I'm going to take about a 5-minute recess before we continue on, just to give us a chance to clear out the chamber. Back to order. And we're going to move on to the committee of the whole part of our agenda this evening. And with that, Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of council, if I can have a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Doucette, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We're now going to move on to disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? With none, we're going to move on to items requiring a separate discussion. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 10 and item 13.
Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Item 3 and item 7.
Further items? Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 15.
Further items? Councillor Elliott.
Items 6 and 14.
Further items? Now that we have the whole agenda lifted this evening. Members of council, if I can have a motion for the remainder of the items, please. Councillor Butters, Councillor Desmarais, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We already did presentations. We don't have any delegations this evening. I'm not going to go into a report this evening, although I have one prepared. I'm not going to go into one because of the lengthy agenda that we do have, and as well as the amount of reports that you want to discuss. But I do want to mention one thing. Last week, we were once again recognized for some design projects that we had, or recognized for some projects that we have with respect to the design. And as you remember, we were award winners a few years back for our Main Street project through our planning department, and of course the design and the contribution it's made to the community. Last week, we did attend the Niagara Community Design Awards and did receive an Urban Design and Architecture Achievement for the Valley Health and Wellness Center. This specific to sustainability. They had different groupings, different classifications, and sustainability was one of them. And we were awarded, amongst many nominations, with this sculpture that will be housed in the Valley Center, as well as this plaque. Councillor Steele and I both attended the ceremony, and once again found out that evening that we were the award winners for sustainability for the Valley Health and Wellness Center. So, as I said that evening in front of a crowd of many individuals, I'll repeat this evening, although I won't repeat everything. I just want to repeat one thing, and that's my appreciation to councils, not just this council, but past councils, many individuals throughout the community, in particular those that were directly involved in the committee, as well, most importantly, members of staff, and of course the team that designed and managed the project, as well as built it, that being MHPM, MJM, and of course those folks from Aquacon, Mr. Hanson, yourself in particular from staff, Mr. Hakeem, and Mr. Other Gary Macon, as well as even before him, Tom Lennon, that were involved in the process. So those thank yous were most appropriate to make then, that evening, as well as this evening, that then gave us the ability to win this award and the many other awards that we've been winning almost on a monthly basis for the Valley Health and Wellness Center. I see our regional councillors went off and is not here this evening. He was here, but I guess he didn't want to last the evening, so he went off. So if there's any questions of regional council nature, I'd be more than happy to entertain those questions. With none, we'll now move on to councillors' items, new business. Are there any councillors' items, new business? Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one thing that I would like to speak about tonight. We've had some incidents in Ward 2 of dogs at large, in particular some very aggressive dogs that have been causing some problems. And as a result, I've spent about 2 or 3 hours on the phone with the SPCA talking about various enforcement techniques. They have come up with a new program. It's called the SOUP program, and it's a stepped-up enforcement process whereby if people do call in to report dogs at large or aggressive dogs in any way, it will get mapped, and if they see a lot of incidents in certain areas, it will trigger an enforcement, they will start coming out and driving around the area is what's going to happen. They're not proactive at this point, they're reactive. But they will change that and come out and start going around the areas and looking for dogs. But it will only trigger if many people call in. They have to see a lot of incidents. So I just would like to urge people that if they do have dogs running around the neighborhood, that they do call in. I know we do have that problem in the southern parts of Ward 2, and it's really quite an issue. So I'm hoping we'll be able to get behind all of this and sort it out.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further new business? Councillor Adams, Councillor Danch.
The only thing I want to bring forward tonight, or just a little conversation of, it may be -5 out there tonight, but this weekend's looking like it might almost be spring. And of course, with that comes a little bit of cleanup in the yards and whatnot. Those large items that people want to leave out by the street and stuff like that, they're not going anywhere unless you make a simple phone call. And I spoke with the lady from the region today, and I want you just to write this down and maybe keep it for reference later on. If you call 905-227-7771, somebody will pick up those large items that you can't handle. You don't have to leave the box spring out on the road for 2-3 months expecting it to be picked up, because the garbage guys, they're not going to do it. You got to make that call. So please, and if you don't want to call Thorold, I believe it's 855-227-7771, and we can help to make the community a little bit cleaner, a little bit sooner, and hopefully we do get that spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danch. That's a great point, because a lot of times you find some of these articles even out well, you find them out being dumped into rural areas. And, you know, quite frankly, folks, you don't have to go through that problem or that challenge or that effort. As Councillor Danch alluded to, if you just simply pick up the phone and call down to the region, they'd be more than happy to pick up some of those white goods, larger fridges, stoves, mattresses, and things of that nature. So just a simple phone call. Thanks, Frank, for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Members of Council, no further items of new business. With none, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. I do have a set of minutes here from the 7th meeting regular of Committee of the Whole, dated March 10, 2014. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodner. Councillor Butters. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to the consideration of the items that require separate discussion this evening. We'll start off with, I see a few members in here or out there that are waiting very patiently, Gary and others. So I'm going to go right to your items first. Let me just check where they are, so that way you guys don't have to. 7 and 10. So let's start off with item 7, Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Department of Engineering and Operations, Engineering Division Report Number 2014-10, subject rebuild of the DeWitt Carter Playground. That Council of the City of Port Colborne approve the allocation of funds from the 2014 Capital Reserve account for the reconstruction of the DeWitt Carter Playground at an estimated cost of $63,200, and further that staff be directed to prepare tender documents for the project upon approval of the funding.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Desmarais. Any questions or comments? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is excellent, and it's what we were looking for, but, and I'm going to state this, since this has hit the papers, I've received 2 individuals have contacted me, and one has contacted Jamie as well, and they would like to help in building this and putting materials in that. One individual is called John Nichols. He has a rubber product that is used on the bottom and the base of playgrounds, and he would like to talk to someone from the engineering department, whoever puts out the tenders. I have forwarded that email to Mr. Heil, and I would like someone to chat with him. I don't know if he wants to donate materials. I thought that's what it was, but I'm not sure. And the other group that I'm really interested in as well is the fact that our volunteer firefighters would like to get involved in some way. But we need to have a chat with them, and Mr. Heil has the email as well. And Mr. Roberts had indicated to me that they wanted to get involved, and I asked him to contact Mr. Heil. The reason I'm doing it this evening is I'm hoping he's watching, so that we can get him involved and get the volunteers involved. It would be a great project, and the impression I'm getting is they may even want to give some money towards this, again, bringing the cost down. So if we have 2 individuals that will help with the cost and bring the cost down, then that's great. And at the same time, we have a brand new playground for somewhere next to DeWitt Carter. So those are the 2 things. I have forwarded those emails, by the way, to Mr. Heil, both of them, and I've also forwarded them to Councillor Desmarais. Hopefully those individuals can be contacted and find out exactly what's going on. And I would like this passed so that we can get this done as soon as possible. The only concern I have with this is how quickly can we get it in the ground? And the reason I'm saying that is that if it's not until sometime in mid-July, we have kids that are going to be playing in it shortly. What do we do? What kind of safety features are we putting in here? Maybe the volunteers can help with that. Maybe we need to rake it so that it can be, or do we close it down? We need to make a decision somewhere along the line, and we don't need to make that decision tonight. But the faster we can get this going, the better. And if we can't get it going and the kids are playing in there, the little ones especially, then we need to take some kind of measures to make sure that their safety is guaranteed.
Thank you, Councillor. And quite frankly, this is not going to be any different than last year's construction or reconstruction of H.H. Knoll playground. And of course, what we had to do with respect to ensuring that while it was being reconstructed, that safety was of paramount concern. Mr. Henson?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. In anticipation of the approval of this report tonight, we've prepared the contract documents. It's something we've done many times in the past. We're anticipating a mandatory meeting for this site on April 3rd. The tender will close April 14th. There's a 6-week delivery for, there's a 6-week period for delivery and construction of the site, which pretty much takes us to the middle of June. We're thinking with school running till about the end of June that we would start the construction right after the school closes out for the season, near the end of June or 4th week in June. So that's sort of the anticipated construction period. With regards to materials, we would really express, from a staff point of view, a word of caution here. We'd like to see the successful proponent that puts these playgrounds in, that it all be done as one installation. There's CSA specifications in terms of the accessible materials that have to go into these playgrounds, whether it be rubberized material or wood fiber or sand. There's a CSA specification that has to be met. There are warranties involved with the contractor that puts this in. So we would recommend, from our point of view, and we've made a call to the gentleman who had contacted Councillor Doucette and left a voicemail with him. We haven't contacted with him yet, but we'd like to see this go forward because of the liability issues, the accessibility issues, that the proper materials, the most cost-effective material to put in the playgrounds is this wood fiber, engineered wood fiber material that goes on a stone base with fiber mat, and this is the most cost-effective way to ensure accessibility and also meet the liability requirements from our insurers. So that's all being included in the tender as it goes out.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Further questions, comments? Councillor Demerick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say thank you to staff for the work you've done and for how quickly you've acted on this, and knowing what I know about how long it takes to get things done. This was really fast action, and I'm really happy with it.
Thank you, Councillor. Further comments? Councillor Danch.
Thank you for that. Just one quick one there. I was over at my mother's the other day, and it's always a pleasure to meet with my mother. Being a graduate of DeWitt Carter, those 8 years that I spent there, there's a memorial plaque in the park, and it says, donated to kindergarten or DeWitt Carter School and the Eastside Athletic Ladies Auxiliary. I believe it says 1950, and I got a picture over here. I forwarded it to Ron, and my mother's adamant that that thing stays in the park. And I think Ron's positive that we're going to get this plaque looked at and cleaned up a little bit. It's not real legible. It has been there since, I think, 1950, which put me at about -10. But I really like to see that stay in the park, and I'm really glad that DeWitt's getting a new park. I know the new park near my home, the kids are using it all the time, and it's always a good thing. So thank you.
The last thing we're going to do, Frank, is upset your mom.
Well, your name came up.
Well, especially my grandparents were both on the Athletic Association, were part of that whole process. So, you know, and your mom is a very good guardian of that. Believe me, I heard from her all the time. But that will be entrusted with, I'm sure, Mr. Hanson. Okay, Mr. Heil.
Your Worship, we've been working on title. There's a piece of that the school board owns. There's the school, then there's the regional property, then they own a piece of land, then we own a piece of land. And it had been leased to the Volunteer Firefighter Association. We recently had that changed, so that has been cleaned up. So we're going to continue with making sure that we maintain that portion and including the school property. Just want to let you know that it's not perfect.
Great, thank you, Mr. Howell. Members of council, any further questions or comments? I see our park champion is coming up to the podium, and she'd like to say a few words. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm over the moon, so thank you that you heard me. I also, in regards to Frank's, there is a bench that is in the park as well. DeWitt Carter had that bench. It's a memorial bench for one of the staff that used to work there. So on that note, I had forgot about that with the petition. So maybe that could be something consideration too, because the children raised the money to help with that bench, if it's my understanding. Okay. So I'd like for that to be part of the park for the kids from DeWitt Carter as well. Great. So thank you very much. Best thing fun. So thank you.
Thank you. Members of council, any further questions or comments? With that, your pleasure to the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. We're now going to move on to item 10. Councillor Kenny. Item 10. Councillor Kenny, go ahead. You guys are next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Gary Matheson of Matheson's Drug Store. We request for waiving of developmental fees for the building of a new medical center at the corner of Steele and Clowley Street in Port Colborne. That the correspondence received from Gary Matheson of Matheson's Drug Store request for waiving of development fees for the building of a new medical center at the corner of Steele and Clowley be referred to the Director of Planning and Development for a report, which is great. But I believe Mr. Matheson is here present tonight and would like to speak to this. So Council is aware of what his anticipated plans are for that corner.
Thank you, Councillor. If I can have a seconder to that recommendation, please. Councillor Elliott. And I'll need leave of council to allow Mr. Matheson to speak. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Gary, come on up. Yeah, over there is fine. We've had a lot of pharmaceutical people in here tonight.
First of all, I realize this isn't in the normal area for waiving of the fees, and I also realize that it could be considered strictly commercial. My point of the thing is asking for this waiver is to be able to use some of these funds to try and attract a physician. This town needs physicians, and I don't think if anybody would disagree with that. We've got a couple others that are on the verge of retiring. We could lose our hospital. If we get, well, the Minister of Health has already said we're going to lose it. If we can get some extra physicians in, it will expand the number of physicians in town that will be able to look after people. I'm looking down the road, and maybe some of you have kids that have been living in town, growing up here, have moved away to get jobs in another place. You don't see them again. Now all of a sudden, you're 80 years old. There's no place for x-rays, ultrasounds, or anything here. Welland, Fort Erie. How are you going to get them? Who's going to pay for it? You don't drive anymore. You've lost your license. Is the region going to pay for it? Is the city going to pay for it? If you think ahead to this point, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to use it for my personal business because I have the money that I've invested in it. I'm trying to use it to attract physicians. And all I'm asking you to do is think of things in that perspective. If I can get the region to some, the city here, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think they offer $10,000 now to help a physician get established. Other municipalities are offering anywhere from 70 to 100 and more. I've been told by one physician, they just laugh. They say 10,000 when we can get 70 or 75 somewhere else. Why would we come? There's another municipality in the region where they're getting space for $100 a month, and I got that from a physician. Now you imagine $100 a month, that doesn't even cover your hydro for a building. So my idea is to take these funds and use them, whether it's for a month's free rent or whatever, if I can get some physicians in there. My daughter's talked to a couple she knew that both graduated from medical school this year and finished. They're not interested. They've got other areas, but she said they have friends that might be interested. And I can't say whether you're going to get a physician here. Look what happened when Dr. Shu came in. What did the municipality spend for him? $40,000, $50,000?
Dr. Shu? No,
No?
nothing, zero.
To get him that space in the hospital?
We gave him the incentive package.
Yeah.
But he paid it back when he left.
He did he? Okay, well, that's good to hear. But this is the type of thing that you have to do to try and get physicians in. I mean, it's scary when you've lived in the town and grown up in it, when you think ahead. As you get older, where are you going to be at? Whether these funds would be able to help attract a physician, I don't know. On it. It's not going towards my own personal business. It's going towards the medical side. And I don't know. Other people, you may have some input to me. If you do, I appreciate it, because it's. I talked to Joanne, and I guess the city offers 10,000 now. Is what she told me, and they're right now they're working on other areas. They're trying to get nurse practitioners in, but it's still the core is your physician. Should be able to look after patients, make the final decisions with their care, and things like that. And I see a lot of the seniors that come into my practice now, they can't get around anymore very easily. They have to depend on friends or somebody else. So if we can keep some of these services in town, and I actually wanted to put in the basement there, but as you know, with all the rock, it's just too expensive. I had future thought of maybe, if we get someone to make some donations, putting an ultrasound in, an x-ray, things like that. Because if this goes, which the minister says it's going to, we won't have that. We won't have that to help the people in town. And it can enable a physician in town with that equipment to say, okay, this is what this is probably. We can keep them here and treat them. We can send them to a bigger center instead of them having to go down. Who's going to pay for the ambulance if they have to go down there? And it's not really that important. You know yourself, people. I'm sure you all know somebody who's retired and they're just scraping by right now. So who's going to pay all those costs? They're not on welfare assistance, but they haven't got a lot of money. And this is, and I'm not saying I'm going to be successful either, because who knows? The whole thing may not even go that well. But my idea is to try and carry some of that out and get some physicians in town.
Great.
And that's where I'm coming from. Not put money in my pocket. It's from that perspective, eh? So hopefully you'll give it some consideration. And to me, you're putting $50,000 in the playground. The development costs aren't that much. And if we can, I don't even care if you want to have a say in how it's spent. If I can save that amount of money, that's fine with me. You know, I've talked to Joanne different times, and we just don't seem to be having a lot of luck. Okay, we got Dr. King in there, who's doing an excellent job, but then Dr. Dewar retired. Okay. And the people who haven't got physicians, you see some of them have congestive heart failure and things like that. I've seen a couple. You send them up here. Well, you know, some of them, if they haven't got the money, just tell them to call 911 or go to St. Catherine's or Welland right now, but that may not be there. What do? They put it off, and then they have more problems because they think, I haven't got the money to pay for that. And that's where I'm coming from. And as I say, I don't know, am I allowed to make a couple other comments in town I'd like council to think about right now? Interject?
Absolutely.
Not to do with that.
About what?
About what was our hospital.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I've never been able to find the exact answer, but I was told once that this was shares in this. This was a corporation. Nobody that I know of knows where they are now, the shares. I'm not quite sure how our provincial government managed to take it all over when you had the citizens working here and donate. The other thing that I was told, and this was told to me by a lawyer who used to practice in town, whether he was right or not, he said, if that did not stay as a hospital, the land reverted to the McGilvery family. It was donated by them. Now stop and think, if the records are true, what would happen to that building if they close it up as a hospital? I think somebody needs to do some investigation and see if they can find anything on that. And the other thing, and Vince, I told talked to you before about, is the east side of the canal. I hope that you people are still looking at that, because I can picture that like better than Niagara on the Lake. There's an old-fashioned east street, the walkway along the canal with the railings like on this side, and the market stalls all the way along there with a little awning on top. And utilizing the skills of some of our artisans and things like that here. And whether you'd ever get a hotel to build out the end and bridge across like on this side over to Nickel Beach. But if you envision it, I really feel that it would make a big difference. And I know you have to get the federal government on side and things like this. But if you stop and think of what Niagara Lake's got and what we've got, I mean, look at West Street. It's improved a lot. And I think it would do a lot for the city. Anyway, I won't keep you. I know you got a lot of things, and hopefully you'll get some consideration to those fees.
Before you leave, thank you, Mr. Matheson. Members of council, any questions or comments? Okay, just a couple quick comments, clarification. First off, you're right about the east side. We are on that. We actually have a CIP 3D model that's on the website.
That's great.
That gives you some initial indication and how that's maturing. Just some clarification, Gary, with respect to the incentive package. You're correct. The incentive package was put in place years ago. It has been very successful. We recruited Dr. Bell, Dr. King, Dr. Prue, who's since left, Dr. Shu, and the reason why, and I want to be clear on this, the reason why Dr. Shu left is because he couldn't fill out a roster.
I heard that.
You know, as you know, it's a business, and if docs are going to come into town and they have an expectation with respect to patients, usually it's between 1,000 and 1,500. Dr. Shu only was able to roster about 300, and therefore he didn't find it feasible, hence the reason why he left. However, having said that, you're right. There are other docs, such as Dr. Dewar just recently retiring, Dr. King picking up his slack with respect to his roster. There are others that are, I'm sure, going to retire within the next 3 to 5 years. We are continuing with our incentive packages, but you have to know this, Gary, and you'll probably see where I'm going to go with this. The Physician Recruitment Committee, chaired by Councillor Kenny, has really put an emphasis, has taken the emphasis away from a $10,000 times 4, well, 3, and then the signing bonus. The emphasis is now away from that because, quite frankly, a lot of the municipalities are getting away from the incentive package as per se, so much money per year. What we decided to do was dedicate a lot of our resources, our budget, towards the capital side of it. And what this does is it encourages folks like you to be a part of the recruitment process. And when I say people like you, I mean folks that have the clinics, whether it be Mapleview, led by owned by the Schultz family, and led by Dr. Remington and West, and as well Dr. Wada and Dr. Rivers. Over here in Charlotte Street with Dr. Whitehall, Dr. Bell, and Dr. King, that clinic, as well as any other clinics, both existing and or new. It puts the emphasis on the capital side of it, gives you an ability to help us recruit, and what we then do is, once you do recruit, we offer you, as well as a doctor, an incentive for capital purposes. What I'm getting at, Gary, is one of the things that you may want to consider, and you don't have to decide now.
No, I appreciate it.
We can possibly make this as part of the report, is that instead of asking for a waiving of development charges, because I'm sure, as you and I discussed before, when you waive development charges, all you're doing is deferring those development charges onto the taxpayer. When the taxpayer are already paying a certain amount within their taxes to a budget, that's emphasizing capital improvements to clinics to recruit doctors. So instead of actually asking for a waiver of development charges, what you may want to consider, what may suffice, is in fact taken advantage of, once you do recruit docs, the capital allocation that can be taken out of the already established physician recruitment and retainment education budget.
How much is that, by the way?
It can range. It can range anywhere between 20 and 60,000. It's all in the ask.
And the reason I'm asking that is because if you're going to a physician, sorry, you have to have some sort of way of saying to them, this is what we can do if you come and set up your practice. You have to know that ahead.
That's right. And that's why I'm making the comment now. And you know, it's you making the ask to the committee that has already established. The taxpayers have already paid for that budget through our budget that we're hoping we're going to pass tonight. Through that operating budget, there's so much monies that were allocated to the physician recruitment, retainment, and education. I'll use the word division, department, committee. And that committee is then presented with options, with recommendations by folks like yourself. It could be Dr. Remington, it could be Dr. Bell, it could be different clinics, including the CHC, by the way, to offer so much capital money contingent upon recruitment of physicians.
Are the guidelines all set for this now?
It's a simple, we're flexible, and it's a simple ask. So what you're presenting to council tonight with respect to a new allocation of taxpayers' dollars, what I'm suggesting you do is actually take advantage of the existing allocated taxpayer dollars and come to the physician recruitment committee to then solidify a blueprint that you can then offer those docs that you're trying to recruit into your facility.
Okay, because when I talked to Joanne, all she said was they had $10,000 for them to help buy office equipment.
Well, there's more than that. She's being very frugal, isn't she?
But we're not getting any doctors that way.
That's the beginning of negotiation.
Yeah.
So that's what I would suggest we do in this process. There is going to be a report coming back to council that will discuss the particulars of your ask, which is fair for yourself as well as members of council. But I ask that you keep that in mind as well, because there's another option there for you, okay, to take advantage of already established taxpayer dollars.
See, the development fees, as you know, aren't very much from the city. It's the region that really
well, the
knocks
region
the
also
heck out of us all.
the region also has a recruitment division as well, and that's why I'm sort of leading you there.
We've talked to them, and we didn't get anything from them either.
Yeah. So
are they hiding this?
Let's bring this to them, Gary. But as well, let's follow this process. Council can go back to the next meeting with that report and say, here's your development charges. But I doubt it. And I'm just being upfront with you.
Yeah, no.
Because council, both regional council and municipal council have gotten very, very frugal with respect to development charges. Because what you're doing is if the developer doesn't pay for it, the taxpayer pays. And what I'm getting at is if the taxpayers already established a fund for this, then why not try to take advantage of that? And that's what I'm getting at. So I'm just being upfront with you.
So who do I find out from, Joanne?
No, just give me a call, and I'll get you at the next meeting. But you have to put up with B.
Well, that's okay. I've put up with her for years, so.
So give that some consideration. I don't want to. What I'm trying to do here, Gary, is I don't want to give you false hope, and I don't want to BS you or anything. I just want to be very upfront with you, and also present all the options for you, so that way you can pursue all these options. And I'm more than happy to help facilitate that.
So really, what you're saying then, if I go talk to a physician, the facts and figures you'd have down, we could offer them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the important thing.
So let's get that report back to council. That's the recommendation tonight, and that way Dan can outline a lot of the implications of your ask, both positive and negative. And as well, what I'm trying to do as well is present you with some other options. Whether it augments compounds or it is and/or, that's where we can go from. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to give you. The last clarification I wanted to talk about was the UCC. Although the minister has recommended the closure of 4 hospitals, replaced by the 1 hospital in hopefully southern Niagara, I do want to make the comment as well that we've been very diligent, and I've been trying to pull, and it's been very difficult because he just simply won't return my emails. And I've been trying to pull Mr. Smith, Dr. Smith, to make a decision on the location of the 2 UCCs. As you know, when the mayor's made the recommendation for the 2 sites of the new South Niagara Hospital, we also made it contingent upon the UCC staying open in Port and Fort. So quite frankly, my expectation, is that a freestanding UCC will be brought back to Port Colborne, whether it's in the existing site or it's a new site, is regardless. The bottom line is that that's what the recommendation was, and the recommendation was contingent on that. I have to tell you that I have sent 2 pieces of correspondence with my intentions within those correspondence to Dr. Smith, asking him to once and for all make a decision on the location of the 2 UCCs. I haven't even got a response back yet.
No.
As a matter of fact, the last one I sent to him, reminding him to respond, was also copied to the Premier and the Minister of Health, and I didn't get a response from them either. I'll be mentioning that to the Premier tomorrow when I'm meeting with him.
Do you know anything about your dad or your grandfather would have known too about the shares in the hospital?
That I don't know. We'd have to send correspondence out to both the province and...
I heard it from what I considered a good source. Yeah. And I know, I guess if we live in a dictatorship, they could take the hospital over and the shares are null and void.
So Gary, I just wanted to clarify that for you. But going back to the presentation itself, that's what I would suggest you do, is come to the committee. That way, if, either, again, when council is presented with the report at the next meeting, whether it's a compound or whether it's, and or, what I mean by that is that if council turns it down, you have another option to pursue.
Okay. Yep.
Okay?
Yeah. I just want to try and get them in because I don't like the way the town's going with the shortage. And I know, as you said, Dr. Gomez, Dr. Runge may only have a few years.
You're right.
And where are we at as citizens? Yeah. You're old, you can't get your driver's license. If you have an accident now when you're 70, maybe you don't know, or maybe you do know, your license is automatically suspended, taken away from you. And you have to go and redo the practical and the written and everything again to get it back. It's scary with some of the older people. And I know we have some support agencies in town as it is, but it's something to think about in the big picture.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate your time this evening. Members of council, are there any questions or comments further to the report? Gotcha, Barb. I can do that from here. Members of council, any further questions or comments further to the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Gary, before you leave, Dan, you're expecting that report at the next meeting? Can we get a copy of it to Gary as well beforehand? That'd be great. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. Members, we're now going to move on to item 3 because we have 2 members of staff that have been very patient. So with that, I'm going to call upon Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Department of Community and Corporate Services, Community Services Division, report number 2014-3, subject Flavors of Niagara, Advisory Committee amendment to the terms and reference and rebranding. That the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne approve the amendments to the terms of reference Article 1.0, composition of the committee up for the Flavors Advisory Committee to no more than 3 members from the public, private sector representing the local food and beverage industry, i.e. local restaurant, service clubs, and or local craft brewery winery representation. 2, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne endorse the proposed changes and allows staff to develop the Flavors of Niagara Presence, a taste of the South Coast brand that allows us to exploit the tourism line that is included in almost all city correspondence, including advertising and media content. This provides us with building brand recognition and allows the culinary festival to develop and grow towards culinary tourism designation. That the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne allows staff to continue to work to implement plans to attract more of the food truck market from Southern Ontario and investigate opportunities to apply for the Feast On designation through the Ontario Culinary Tourism Association, and 4, that City Clerk be directed to prepare the appropriate bylaw amendment for the terms of reference as amended for council approval.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Desmarais. Questions or comments? Councillor Doucette.
I can ask a question to the clerk. I believe I know the answer, but if I want to make an amendment to this, then can I make an amendment, or do we have to defeat this and then put a new recommendation on the floor? All I'm looking for is to make an amendment to it and add something into it.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As long as the amendment is not contrary to the intention of
Okay.
the motion itself, then an amendment would be permitted.
Okay, thank you. Then, in reading the report, I understood that we're looking at rebranding. I understood the fact that we are looking at making it a better product. I also, in looking around and talking to some people and individuals, they were indicating to me that it wasn't what it used to be like in the past. Okay? No matter what we do, no matter if we turn it local and whatever. Okay? I believe that if we want to rebrand something, we have to find a way for people to sort of, not completely, but somewhat forget about the new one when we give it the new brand. So that by doing that, we have something new that people want to take a look at. If we don't do that, then they're going to say, well, it's just the same thing as it was before, and we're just going, and that's not what we're looking for. If you're saying you want to rebrand it, it means something brand new, then we have to have some separation between the old and the new. That's the way I see it. Therefore, I suggest that we add the number 4 in other options on the report that says council can direct staff to take a 1-year hiatus from the festival and instead take the time to work and create a more comprehensive culinary event modeled for 2015. The sponsorship component also has a level of expectation on that development, and consideration to fulfill those objectives is key towards the financial success of this particular event. If we add that into that, we essentially have the same recommendations, except we're saying, let's take a year off, let's take a hiatus, and in 2015 we're back with a brand new one, and let's go to it. And I believe that that's the only way to do it. If you're talking rebranding, you have to do it this way. You have no choice.
Thank you. Further questions or comments to the report? Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, I just wondered where the planning stage was at for this
Mr.
festival.
Hakeem?
I realize this is like about structure and committee and whatever, but I just wondered where actually we were at.
Mr. Hakeem.
Through your worship to Councillor Butters. Currently, we recently met as staff as well as with the sponsorship coordinator to get this rolled out as a plan, actually. So right now we're still in the planning and recruiting stage, and we felt compelled to put forward a report. I understood that from last year's experience, with all due respect, that Councillor Kenny was also involved on the committee, and we still haven't had the opportunity to meet with her as well in respect to the process right now. So we're still in the planning stages at this point.
Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I think it's commendable of staff to, even in their report, say they need time. I mean, if we really, as Councillor Doucette said, want to have this event, you know, it says time is of the essence, and staff do not feel time constraints in 2014 may not allow for the full conceptual plan. A consideration to take 1 year leave or hiatus may be an advisable approach to allow staff to take time and create a more comprehensive culinary event. So I commend staff themselves that if we're really going to make this an event that we're all proud of, like our, you know, like our Canal Days, this is a food culinary experience. Canal Days, I know, is something totally different, but I just think that the fact that they know themselves about the time constraints, and yes, I haven't had a chance. When I got this in my package, I thought, yeah, I haven't even had a meeting yet. So, but anyways, I agree that you should take the time off and do it right. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really love the Flavors Festival. I think it's a great one, and I want to see it continue. But I also have concerns with being a couple of months away from the event and not having had a meeting where a council person is present, not having a well-defined committee. We don't see names on a committee list. I just don't feel that we're ready to take this event and roll it out in a brand new way. And I'd like to see us take the extra time, take this time off, and make it all that we can so that we can ensure having it through future years. Right now, I think that if we went forward at this point, it would be a stab in the right direction, but I think a stab is the wrong thing to do. I think we have to nail it. It has to come down and come down well the first time out. And I just don't think we have enough time left this year to do that.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll echo some of the comments that have been made previous. I guess if you venture back to the first couple of years on flavors, when it was the more geared to wine, it was a jazz and blues festival. The infrastructure that we put into it was canopies and platforms for the vendors to sit on, and it was really well done. The music was great. Peter Appleyard came. I mean, the park was, I'm going to say it was half full, because if you filled the park, it would be amazing. But it was half full. Revenues were great for the vendors. I think the music was well done. Year two, same thing, maintained itself. And we kind of ventured away from what the original thought of flavors was supposed to be, and it was a culinary and wine kind of meeting with blues and jazz in the park. And all of a sudden, we got away from that, and it lost its verve. When I took a look at this, and I don't want to be classified as a country hater or anything like that, but I'm thinking country music and food trucks. And if you take a look at what the food trucks sell, it's a different kind of food. It's not something that you see every day in a restaurant. A lot of times now they're at Blues in the Vineyards is where they go to. It's more of a gourmet type of food. It's off the beaten path. I think if we're going to go with a food truck lineup, and that's where we want to go, and that's what we're going to rebrand it, I think we ought to look for a style of music that complements the food trucks. I think if we get back to what we originally started with, more blues and jazz, that's something that's not offered except in vineyards. We've got a beautiful lakefront. We had a lot of people that came out, maybe a tinge of gray in their hair. I think we did an economic study that said it poured in excess of $400,000 into Port Colborne's coffers. I'm not sure that the mix is right. I like the thought of postponing it for a year. I'll definitely support that. That gives us time, get a corporate sponsor on board, beat the bushes for people that want to come, define what it is you're going to be. It gives you a whole year to go out to the food truck industry, define what we are going to be musically, get you a whole year to line up musical talents. Let's get it back, or as close to what we had, what we started with, what worked. As far as the feast on, it gives us time to collaborate with them, to apply for any funding that they may have. They may have, tips on what we can do to make the festival even better. So I'd like to see us regroup, take a step back, see what we can do, rebrand it. If we're only going to go for 2 days, you got to get it spot on, because you've only got 2 days to make it instead of 3. If we get 1 day of rain, it's going to be real tough after 1 day of sales to try to recoup anything. So step back, take a look at what we're doing. We're behind the 8 ball right now because we haven't even defined what it is we're looking for. It's almost April with 2 months to go. Everybody's got their festivities planned for the summer, so take a year off, come back, plan it out, and come back to us.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Butters.
Well, I'm one of those people that I want it to be a country thing. I do not want it to be jazz and blues. I am sick of it. I'm tired of it. It needs to me, it has to be a whole big shake-up, and I think to take that year off is a good amount of time to develop that concept. And there isn't a good, there's a lot of different kinds of country music that it would just amaze you. There is a festival in New York State in a little place called Sherman, New York. And Sherman, New York is a very, very small I don't want to call it a town exactly because it's kind of too small to be a town, but it hosts a summer festival that is wildly popular. And they bring in people from all over, I think, Canada and the United States that come to this little wee place up in the hills, and that place rocks. It is just incredible the what happens in this place. I would love to see us here have something like that. And I think that because there really isn't anything like that close by, or certainly not in the Niagara region, it could work here, and it could work really, really well. So that's just my 2 cents worth, and I like the country thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. Further questions or comments, members? Mr. Hakeem, any comments?
Your Worship, no, but I would certainly open the floor up to my colleagues in the back, Elena and Gina, if they have any other comments, if you'd like to hear, or anything else that they might add. I would.
Ladies, any comments? None.
Don't rush. Gina's looking in the back.
Members, any further comments or questions? Just a few questions, Harry. I read the report, and I want to put some context to this with respect to how Flavors started in the first place. Many folks will recall back many, many years ago when we had one of our illustrious councillors that worked extremely hard on a yearly basis, and when that time came on a daily, nightly, and I mean nightly basis, to put on Ethnic Day in the park. And I'll tell you, as many of you know, I was very close with Rose Szymanski. She was part of our family. And swore up and down that I would never let that whole concept go. For years, she made me promise her that, you know, when the day did come where she would not be with us anymore, that in fact, if I had any abilities, that I would work extremely hard to ensure that her legacy was carried on through the hard work that her and many, many other fine ladies and men put with respect to Ethnic Day in the park, if not the entire week. When the Folk Arts Council came to its demise, and not done on purpose, just lack of people to get involved, we sort of picked up the ball with many folks here in the city, volunteers, organizations, to really rebrand the Ethnic Festival, especially with the challenges that they were running into because of the regulations that public health was putting on different organizations that you would otherwise find in a park when Ethnic Day did happen. To rebrand it and bring forward a more able and conducive manner of the same concept, with bringing food in the park and giving people an opportunity to come into the park and share each other's company with some great food, some great talent on the stage, and of course with that, some an ability for people to come into Port Colborne from outside the city. Ethnic Day was more Port Colborne, and people from Port Colborne came to the park. What we try to do is that, but also give a reason for people from outside of Port Colborne to come down to the park and enjoy our waterfront and enjoy our community. So, you know, at the end of the day, that's how Flavors was born. And of course, as Councillor Elliott alluded to, it had a spin with respect to jazz and wine. When I read this report, I have to say, I was going to call you Harry, that I felt that again. I felt that old concept come back with respect to really giving people an opportunity to come down and have some great food and some great entertainment. And was going to mention tonight that that's where we want to gear toward, or we should be gearing toward, is that same concept that Rose and Mrs. Montopoli and Mrs. And Mary, what's the rest of her name? Anyways, I can see her face, but all those folks work so darn hard to have here in Port Colborne. So, you know, I'll be honest with you guys, at the end of the day, I do not support postponing this for a year, you know, and for two reasons, and I'll get to the second reason in a second. But the first reason is because I think it is an opportunity to continue on with that tradition. And with that said, do we do it like we have? Maybe not. We can get the committee back together and essentially stick to the roots, stick to our roots, but at the same time, rebrand it to what's appropriate. When I say rebrand it, by the way, I don't mean change the name. I think the name's appropriate. But I mean, you know, work with what we have, both locally as well as with those that we have from outside the region. But really ensure that the whole concept of bringing people down to our waterfront, both locally and from outside the region, is paramount. The second reason is that council has passed a budget that includes personnel, that includes resources in our special events office. And we're paying human resources, we're paying other resources to ensure that our special events department is kept busy. And when I start hearing that we're going to go the other way, then should we relook at our budget, our special events budget? Because right now, you know, over time, that part of community services has matured because of the events that we're putting on. If we're going to start dropping events, then we should in fact start dropping expenses. So are we going to look at that as well? So that's for some consideration, especially with the budget being on tonight's agenda. And that's just the business side of it. So I give council some thought. It's easy to stand up and just say, to heck with it, you know, we're just going to take the easy way out, and we're just going to knock it off for a year. That's the easy way out. You know, what I'm challenging you on is trying to do something this year as we have in the past, both with our grassroots, but as well with the event as it proceeded. Quite frankly, yes, there was a lot of things behind the scenes that may have cracked, and may a little bit of water get into the cracks, but we've got a great team here. We had a wonderful team here. And quite frankly, the event has been successful. So I just throw that out there for some consideration versus just throwing out an opportunity here. Questions? Councillor Doucette, Councillor Elliott.
Well, it looks like you and I are going to agree to disagree, because I believe that the budget item is still going to be there. This team, that is a good team, is going to need the time to put together a good program and an excellent new festival type of thing. Now, I agree. I mean, we shouldn't drop it. And one of the concerns I had with even bringing this over was that if we do this, do we lose it completely? And I went around talking to people, and I'm being guaranteed that in 2015, there will be a festival, an event that we will be proud of. Because that was a serious concern of mine, because I remember those days when there was Rose, and I mean, I remember my youngest being born and running over because it was during the time of the ethnic day and grabbing pierogies and whatever from my wife who had just given birth and so on and so forth. So I want to make sure it doesn't die. So that was my first concern. And I'm being told it will not. Okay, so that one is satisfied. Number two, if we are 12 weeks away from this activity, and we haven't even started planning yet. We're just getting in the process. So what kind of event are we able to put together? So I have some concerns about that. This will give this team time to put together, more time to put a new one together. And I really believe that's the way to go. So I have to disagree with you on that point, that I don't believe that putting it on this year will make a difference. We're not giving, matter of fact, it isn't the easy way to go. It's the hard way to go, because I don't want to lose this. But at the same time, we also have to be realistic. And being realistic, to me, means that I can't allow this to go on, especially if we're rebranding and starting a new one the year after.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to push on to staff a punishment of laying people off or a decision of council to postpone an event. And I'd rather it take a year off and come back strong the following year. And I'd rather take the budgeted amount of money for the capital and put it in a reserve fund just in case we need it for next year. I'd rather come out strong on a rebranding process, having time to research it, find out what's playing out in the field right now, seeing what the hot thing is. I can understand Councillor Butters and her love of country music. And I tell my kids you should listen to all kinds of music, except country. And I guess when you're talking about small towns having big festivals and big events, it all depends on what you want to budget. And I'm going to assume that the town that you're talking about that has thousands of people come in probably has a budget larger than what we're talking about for flavors. You gotta, if you want to attract a lot of people, you gotta have quality entertainment. And that's the thing. Taste of Buffalo or Taste of Country in Buffalo knocks it out of the park, but they get headline stars coming. I mean, if we want to pay for headline people to come in, you're gonna have to move the budget parameters just a little bit. Take a step back. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, we gotta regroup. Let's research it. Let's go out to the food trucks. Let's find out what they want. What are they looking for? What kind of music do they see themselves being part of? And that got the ladies up to come and talk. But I'm all for putting it off for a year. Let them do what they do best. Get it together so that come back next year and go strong. But I'm not in favor of laying anybody off because this two-day festival is not going to take place.
Thank you. Members of council, further questions or comments? Members of staff, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council. Just wanted to clarify a few things, and that is that we're not at a stage where no planning has taken place. All of our infrastructure is booked. We're contracted for any of the infrastructure, security, those types of things have all been taken care of. The things that we don't have nailed down are A, what's the type of entertainment we want? B, we're having trouble with vendors. We'll be completely honest. When you make changes like this, the vendors see that as a challenge as well. We've changed the date. That's a challenge for some of the vendors who initially thought they could and now are saying that there's a good potential that they won't be available. So it's not that we've been sitting back waiting for the report to come to council. Staff have absolutely been proactive in attempting to get to where we need to be. Can we do it in 12 weeks? Yes. Is it going to be a strong product that is reflective of what the city of Port Colborne can provide? We'll do our best. But we can't guarantee that it will be the strongest product we can put out there. And we do have the same fears that if we throw something out in the next 12 weeks and we make it the festival that we know that it can be, it still may not hit the mark that it should be. And that is where some of staff's trepidation comes from. The budget was not put forward as being a strong budget for entertainment. It was based basically on using the food trucks as that momentum. We're hearing from different partners now that maybe country music doesn't fit with the food trucks or doesn't fit with the food truck audience that we were initially going out and trying to recruit. So these are some of the concerns that staff are sitting around as we're putting the report forward that we need to sort out before we truly feel we can put a polished product out there that is reflective of what the city of Port Colborne can do.
Thanks, Lena. Thanks, girl. Thanks, girls. Appreciate it. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have the best special events staff ever, and they do an incredible job. And I know that I've worked with them year after year and on committees and helping with the volunteer aspect, and I've been in their hair over there all the time at Roselawn. And I got to tell you, they work hard, and they do the best that they can with what they're given to work with. Now, this year, though, I just don't feel that they're going to be able to put together what we would like to see come out of that department. They have the ability, there's no question, but I don't think we've given them the proper tools. I really don't. And I think that in order for them to do the best job, we have to give them the best information. And seriously, food trucks, country music, it is not a mix. It just doesn't work together. I think people will tell you that all over the place. The word I hear on the street is that they want to hear country music. So we should pick food that goes with that, That's just the way it is. If you want country music, then you have to have that food. But no matter what, 12 weeks away from the event and we're still just trying to decide that, that's a pretty essential thing to have we should have that to begin with. And here we are trying to decide it, 12 weeks away. That's just not enough time, and I really do believe that the smart move is to lay it down for this year, pick it up next year, spend the time really putting together a great festival, and maybe the special events staff could lend some of their expertise to some of the other groups in town that are pulling off St. John Baptiste festivals and the optimists who are going to be handling Canada Day, that sort of thing, so that we can still have that ethnic aspect to those things and not lose that dream, but at the same time be able to save the best that we can for next year.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments, members? Okay, we do have a recommendation on the floor. It has been seconded. For any changes to be made, this would have to be turned down, or passed would be the direction as per the recommendation of the report. Okay, so you guys get that? Do you want me to repeat it? There's a recommendation on the floor, moved and seconded. You're voting on that recommendation. Okay? Okay, Councillor Bonner, you good? Okay. Okay, so as the recommendation stands, it's moved and seconded. Your pleasure, members. All those in favor? Opposed? That would be lost. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Do I need to reread all of this, or do I simply, all I simply want to do is this. You've got 1, 2, and 3 that is there, stay the way they are. Number 4 becomes the number 4 in item 2, which is on the bottom of, on page 3, I believe. I believe it's page 3 of the report. Item 3. Other options. It's where it says other options. Number 4 and other options would become number 4 here. And then number 5 would be the one that is in the report that the clerk and so on and so forth.
Madam Clerk, you got that?
Okay?
You got it? Okay, so he's inserting on page 74, number 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 4 would be included in number 4 after number 3.
Okay.
See that number 4? That would be included in the recommendations in the items. That would become number 4, and then their number 4 would become number 5. Okay? That's
Mr. Hale?
Your Worship, there's a lot of going on here. Maybe it's better if we just refer it back to committee?
No.
And have a report come forward from Councillor Kenny and any other member of council that works to pull this together. Because right now, item number 3 on here says, staff continue to work to implement plans to attract more of the food truck. Food truck is not what I'm hearing is what you want to do. There are too many things in here that need to be pulled out. This motion that you're proposing right now needs to be dissected.
Okay, may I suggest, if I may I suggest, Councillor just said that you just simply take number 4. Council can direct staff to take a 1-year hiatus from the festival and instead take the time to work, and so on and so forth. That's it. Move that. That way, staff can come back in the future with another report based on the work between the committee that's going to be established, etc., and we'll have new recommendations attached to that.
I don't object to that. Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
So if we can have that as the motion, please. Do I have a seconder to that? Second, Councillor Elliott. Any questions or comments to that? Councillor Butler.
I'm okay with all that. The only comment I would have was that we need staff to come back very soon with something, because I hear, different opinions on council. So the sooner we can get sorted out which way we're going to go, then, it gives staff enough time to get that ship going in that direction, so. Thank you.
Well, and quite frankly, that's the challenge that I'm having. You know, I wanted some more discussion on it. We got that. We even got staff to come up, which was very impressive. But as well, you know, the challenge that I have is this is not the first time this has happened. You know, we've had years past where we've put this thing together. Well, the first year, we put it together in how many weeks, Bob? It didn't take long. You know, and of course, in latter parts of the years when we changed the venue up, and it goes to the credit of staff. There's no question. And the challenge that I have is that at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. But if I respect the fact that if council wants to take a one-year hiatus, that's fine. Although I don't agree with it, it's fine, and I'll respect your decision. But with that said, I just wanted the council to be aware of the challenge that I'm having with respect to that decision. So, with that said, members of council, any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 6. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Department of Planning and Development Report number 2014-19, subject Niagara Lakefront Enhancement Strategy. 1, that Council endorse the Niagara Lakefront Enhancement Strategy attached here 2 as Appendix A. 2, that the Regional Municipality of Niagara be notified of Council's decision. And 3, that Council refer this report to the Capital Budget Session of Committee of Council for discussion purposes.
Thank you. Do you have a second to that, please? Councillor Kenny, questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I answered my my own question I was going to ask. I read the report 3 times, and I finally found the answer when we were talking about the total amount of money that we could get over a 3-year period. I had trouble finding the other $500,000 that we were going to get for the 3-year period, but because it's 2 different funding levels from the region, $2 million a year. And I guess my only concern is I've always stood up and I've always supported the 50-cent dollars, and then I look at this and it's like it's great for the lakefront enhancement to, you know, do projects, but this funding just came out and all of a sudden we're jumping on it because the 50-cent dollars are there. And it's like, was it on our radar 3 months ago or 4 months ago? And I get that we get the 50-cent dollars from the region, but we've also got to put a whole bunch of our own money into it. And if we put money into this, are we taking money away from other things that we were going to do previously? And I know this is going to come up in the capital budget discussions, but it just seemed that just because the incentive is there, does it mean that we have to do it? And I guess that's the question that I asked. There's another item that I pulled later on that I think ties into this that I'll kind of bring back and forth later on. And it's just because the 50-cent dollars are offered, do we jump on it and spend money on maybe something that we hadn't considered and we're going to do it? Does that take money away from something that we had budgeted? I mean, we've got the op center that's coming up. That's going to be a heck of an expenditure for us. There's some other things that we want to do that are going to cut, you know, capital costs. It's just that it's like everything that pops up, we jump on and try to do. And is it something we should be doing, or should we prioritize what we really need to do? A couple of things that were suggested. I mean, there's three items that were suggested by staff to do, and you know, they're probably all really good suggestions. You know, a couple of them are fairly expensive. The $500,000 for the bridge to the beach trail, you know, that's not bad. But $5 million for Nickel Beach amenities, and you know, 3.1 for remediation and landscaping. You know, it's hefty price tags, even with the 50-cent dollars out of the region. So I guess I ask, you know, is it something we want to jump on just because the offer's there, or is it something that, you know, we want to say, you know, it's great, but maybe in a year or 2 down the road, when the second round comes out, maybe we'll be more ready then. So it's just, you know, it just struck me that just because it comes out doesn't mean we have to take advantage of it if it's not something that we weren't going to do prior to the incentives being there. So I just put that out for discussion.
Thank you, Councillor. And I just want to make this point, guys. The recommendation actually is recommending that this be referred to capital budget discussions. So, you know, instead of having a whole big dialogue here this evening, which I appreciate, by the way, a lot of the same conversations are going to be had during our capital budget discussions. And I'm sure that, you know, when you look at our East Side Waterfront CIP, which I'm sure Councillor Demery is going to talk about in 2 seconds, and other initiatives, I think for the most part, it's all capital related, and we're going to be going on about this at capital. So I just give that heads up to all of you. Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will hold many of my comments until those discussions, but I just had to say a few things right now. Are these, were these ever planned? Yes. That's the short answer, yes. These are things that we've been looking at for a long time, and I remember having these discussions back in 1997. And that's when I got involved in the processes around here, coming in to meetings and listening to what was being planned for Nickel Beach and for the southeast side there, and all of these possible enhancements. And every year it's, this may be the year, this may be the year. Well, finally, and then we put a CIP process in place, and all of these things have been happening. Well, finally, there are dollars becoming available. So should we take advantage of them when they come available? Yes. When it's something that's been on the books for that long? Yes, we should. And I just want to make sure that everybody hears that these are not something we're just jumping on that's brand new. It's been talked about for a long, long time, and I'm sure it was well before 1997. That's just when the first time I heard anything about it was.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kenny? Councillor Butters? I thought I seen another hand go up over there. Councillor Butters?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Demery totally. She said it well. I don't have to say it again.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments or questions? Okay, so this will be referred to capital, which we're going to have in a couple of weeks. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 13. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. Environmental Advisory Committee correspondence to the Waste Diversion Ontario expressing concerns regarding the proposal from Call to Recycle for the recycling of single spent batteries. Get the correspondence received from the Environmental Advisory Committee to Waste Diversion Ontario expressing concerns for the proposal from Call to Recycle for recycling of single-use spent batteries be received for information.
Thank you. Do a second to that, please. Councillor Danch, questions or comments? Councillor Kenny.
Thank you once again, Your Worship. I just wanted to pull up that letter. Most of you have a copy of that letter that, first of all, Council gave this to the Environmental Committee to work on and make comment. So I have a great, really, a great group of citizens that sit on the Environmental Advisory Committee. The one we made a motion for last council meeting was the nuclear waste. I just don't think that this should just be received and filed. I would like to see council say, endorse the work that we did on this. Like I said, I can't say enough about this committee, who always takes these challenges to heart and really does work hard towards keeping council's mandate as well. And just to receive and file didn't seem fair enough to me, I guess. I guess I need recognition for the fact that they did a lot of work on this. And if I go back and tell them at our next meeting that we just received and filed, I don't know how happy they're going to be. I don't know what else I can do to make that more prominent, or how council can endorse this. As you see, we've sent that off to many in the all parties, but I just think because they've expressed their concerns, that this should be part of what council, I guess, endorses. I don't know how else to put that, Your Worship. I just don't think receive and file does justice for the work that this environmental committee did. So I'd like to make that motion, that council endorse this with full support, so I can go back and tell that committee that I chair what a great job they did, and council fully supports this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. For a second to that, please. Councillor Danch, are there any questions or comments further than that? You're good? All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 14. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Ministry of Rural Affairs read the City of Port Colborne submission of an application entitled Grow South Ontario, Port Colborne Intermodal Facility to the Rural Economic Development Program. Note, project does not qualify for funding. That the correspondence received from the Ministry of Rural Affairs regarding the City of Port Colborne submission of an application entitled Grow South Ontario, Port Colborne Intermodal Facility to the Rural Economic Development Program, informing the City that the project will not be funded, be received with disappointment, and that staff continue to research alternative funding sources.
Do a second to that, please. Councillor Desmarais, comments or questions? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my biggest question is how much was our ask for the funding and the intermodal project that it asked for funding for, intermodal facility. Can staff expand on what that is and what we asked the government for?
Mr. Howe.
Your Worship, this is a cooperative effort of the Ministry of Employment and Immigration, Ministry of Rural Affairs, the Regional Municipality of Niagara Economic Development, and the City of Port Colborne. We recall council supported staff taking an application at least to do a feasibility study on the potential or possible expansion of a rail line along the east side of the canal, which would assist in intermodal transportation initiatives that are being contemplated by others. The region was going to financially support both the Ministry of Employment and Immigration, or Sondra Mies, and I forget the ministry, it's a ministry of something, and then also the Ministry of Rural Affairs, the local office. Everyone worked right on front, right on top, writing this application, pulling it all together. The application talked about the synergies, the great opportunities. Our ask was for about $60,000 of an $80,000 estimated project. And when I spoke with the ministry after we got this this damned letter, unfortunately, they said, well, you didn't send in letters of support. How many letters do you want? We'll give you 100. Every industry in Port Colborne will be happy to support this, to support the initiative that says a railway expansion is necessary. I thought it was absolutely, well, I'm sorry, I don't want to bite my nose, just bite my face here. There was also, they said, a concern because we asked for more than 50%. And we were told at the outset that you could ask for more. They didn't necessarily have to approve more, and they're very frugal with their funds. And I told the lady on the phone, if that's the issue, believe me, we'll find additional money to pay for this. And then the comment was, well, maybe you can make an application again before the end of April. Hence the reason, Your Worship, we've recommended to Council that we try to pursue it further. I was absolutely aghast with the, I guess, the crassness of this short no. And I know the city has received $2 million for its water line, and maybe they're just saying, okay, it's enough for Port Colborne. Because there's another grant that was refused, the summer experience, or the experience grant was refused. That item of correspondence to come in next meeting. We're reviewing it, depending on, well, I won't go into that. It'll be another topic for discussion. I don't want to, that'll be yours to deal with, Your Worship. There's no answer. We're just going to try to work with it. Right now, the director in the branch that Sondra Mies has helped us with in the ministry, her director is going to ask, does it just take 4 or 5 or half a dozen letters and a re-ask for the amount of money? Will that get it approved by the end of April? So that's where we're going. We're also going to, if that's not possible, we're going to look at FedDev to see if there's federal money that's interested in developing an international port here in Port Colborne rather than the province.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Sale. And if council would give me some latitude, I guess this is the item that I referred to, the last item I pulled. I'm fully supportive of anything that shows development on our port. And it's on the east side. And this is where I'm trying to balance out the lakefront enhancement and what we're trying to do with this report. And I'm trying to balance out what are we doing along the waterfront on the east side. If we're going to reinstitute the rail line and we're going to put in a facility that the CAO talked about, how does that dovetail with anything else we're going to do on the east side? And what do we put first? Through the CIP as well. And that's, yeah, and I can get it because it's going to be jobs and it's economic development. But when we see the report that's contained in here with regards to CIP, comparing both the east side CIP, the downtown CIP, dollar for dollar, and what we want to do downtown, and what we want to do over on the east side, and you're talking about improving the roads and building sidewalks and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, we're talking about a facility such as this, which may or may not increase traffic up and down Welland Avenue. Where are we going? We want to develop a port along the east side, and you know what comes with the development of a port? Traffic, and as much as trucks and rail. And does that part of it blend in with an east side CIP, as in what do we want to do with the roads and what do the roads look like? I'm trying to figure out how both of that goes together. And again, with spending money on investment in rail and a port, as opposed to putting money into a CIP, how do we do that both? And that's where I look at, do we want to define what we want to do? Do we want to define where we spend our money? Or it's the lakefront enhancement strategy popped up and we're going to jump on that and spend money there, but we also want to look at putting money into a multimodal port. I know. But it's, what are we going to do? And if you want to put a port in, what impact does that have on the east side? Because I mean, the impact could be huge to the east side lands. So that's why I pulled this to find out exactly. I had an idea that that's what it was, but I wanted to know for sure, and that we were going to move forward with our application for funding on it and then take it from there. So I'll leave that for everybody else.
Thank you. And again, capital, guys. This is for capital discussion, but just to get council prepared for capital discussion, I'm going to give you some homework tonight. Yay. And it's not something, it shouldn't be something new to you. And that's the comment that I want to make. Dan, how long have we been working on this for? 6 years now? Close to it? 12. 12 years now. So council is fully informed of what we've been doing with respect to well, 3 areas. One is of course the creation of the community improvement plan, the modeling that the committees both on the east side as well as the business community have been a part of for many years. Hence the 3D model that we created about 6 years ago. That's been on the website that we're trying to work toward. The second part of that's the gateway strategy. And of course, with the gateway strategy, identifying basically a mixed land use on the east side. And that's what the CIP model shows. It shows recreational, it shows open space, it shows industrial, it shows residential, and it shows the beach and how it marries into the Transport Canada lands, which in fact has those different uses attached to it. And lastly, I do want to mention that, and although the biggest challenge that we've had with the lakefront enhancement strategy that we talked about earlier, that we're going to talk about at the Capitol, is all the interests that are at play right now at both levels of government, local and municipal or regional, with respect to getting certain pieces of property bought by the taxpayers that, quite frankly, maybe shouldn't be bought by the taxpayers. And I think it also includes the MPCA, for example, with respect to some of the interests they have in some of the properties, funding those properties with taxpayer dollars, and of course, the same folks looking at regional taxpayer dollars to also go into those same properties. So there's a lot of interests at play here with that carrot hanging in front of a lot of folks that want to get their hands on the lakefront enhancement strategy. Having said that, with this project, with the laydown area for the port, the region's already committed $300,000 to this. The region has, as a placeholder, already $300,000 dedicated to this project, which is the reason why we pursued it. So it's not 50 cent dollars, it's actually one-third, one-third, one-third. And on top of that, the private sector has been very adamant in my meetings with them. And when I say the private sector, I don't just mean port-related private sector, I mean industry in general, are adamant that we need this. As a matter of fact, even the trip to New York that I made a few weeks ago, or a few months ago.
December the 9th.
December the 9th, thank you. Those folks were also adamant that this would be a benefit for their operation. So, you know, this shouldn't be new news. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up is that for a lot of you, you might want to pull those same reports back up and take a look at them before Capitol, because it's your direction that's actually created this. And I congratulate you for that, quite frankly, because it's a direction based on creating jobs. While at the same time, having the added benefit that's going to revitalize our canal, lake, waterfront. So there's a lot of opportunity here with respect to new economy that the Gateway strategy has identified. And kudos to you for passing that. Kudos for the many members that have actually worked on it. So I throw that out there for food for thought, so that when we do get into our capital discussion, that a lot of the things that we're discussing tonight that are capital related, that we stick to the script with respect to the agenda that you've created for the last 4 years. Because it does, and is expected to have a greater impact on economy and lifestyle, which is the reason why I thought you chose that route to take. Okay? So, with that said, members, any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 15. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, re the City of Port Colborne's application to celebrate Ontario 2014 Festival and Event Program, re Canal Days Marine Heritage Festival 2014. Note, will not be supported by the program in 2014. That the correspondence received from the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport regarding the City of Port Colborne's application to celebrate Ontario 2014 Festival and Event Program, informing the City that the event will not be funded in the 2014 program, regarding Canal Days Marine Heritage Festival 2014 be received with disappointment, and that staff continue to research alternate funding sources. Now, there we go. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Bodner, questions or comments? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, in the letter received from the ministry, this paragraph says, the ministry recognizes the importance of festivals and events to the Ontario's economy, prosperity, culture, and quality of life. If you would like to discuss how to improve your application for next year, or would like information on other programs and services available to support festivals and events in Ontario, please contact the Regional Tourism Advisor in your area. Now, as I recall, we received a similar letter last year regarding the 2013 festivals and the lack of funding. And I'm only bringing this up because there have been some comments in the public that I found very disturbing, and I know Mr. Heil spoke to one today by email. Comments that are reflecting on staff badly, and I don't want it to do that, so I have a few questions to ask about this. First of all, I'd like to know, did we contact the tourism advisor? What was the advice? Did we take that advice and apply it to this year's application? And just simply that. If we've done all those things, then we've done what we can, and that's what I wanted to hear.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Hakeem?
Through your worship to Councillor Desmarais, we actually did meet with the tourism advisor last year to get a handle on this year and more or less implemented all of the suggestions. In fact, Elaine and I did sit down with him. I'm not sure if Gina was at that meeting, but with respect to how it was prepared. And then we vetted it through the process of staff reviewing it. So we did what we felt what was appropriate, or at least what was necessary, with the confidence that it would go forward. And I believe this is the third year, if I'm not mistaken, because last year was my first year. This is the third year that the Canal Days Festival has not received the $75,000 grant.
Councillor?
Thank you, Harry. And I just, I'm making a point of this simply to let everyone out there in the public know that our staff is doing everything they possibly can to get these funding grants brought to these festivals, and they do take the advice of the tourism advisors and anyone else who will give them advice in writing these grants. So contrary to some of the opinions that are going on out there right now, the staff did everything they were supposed to do. We're not receiving the grants for, or the funding rather, for whatever reason. We don't know, but it certainly isn't within our control.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions or comments, members? All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Thank you. Okay, so that does it for the items on Committee of the Whole, guys. So we're now going to move on to our council agenda. So with that, I will ask, lastly, is there any notices of motion for committee? None? Members of council, I will now ask for a motion to adjourn this portion of tonight's agenda. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Doucette, all in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. So off the council. Madam Clerk, any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One item that I would like to highlight for council, the bylaw to amend the terms of reference for the Flavors Advisory Committee. I've withdrawn that due to the amendment to the associated staff report during the Committee of the Whole meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of council, if I can have a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures this evening? With none, I'll ask for a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes of the 5th meeting regular of council dated March 10th, 2014. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Items requiring a separate discussion. The items listed on your agenda. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Desmarais. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to the minutes of the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting of January 8th, 2014. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Danch. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any notices of motion? With none, Madam Clerk, the introduction of the bylaws, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 60552114 being a bylaw to adopt the estimates for the City of Port Colborne for its own operations for the year 2014. Bylaw 60562214 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement with Watson and Associates for the completion of a development charges study and updated bylaw. And bylaw 60572314 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a 2014 update to the Memorandum of Understanding for improving the planning function in Niagara between the Regional Municipality of Niagara, lower tier municipalities in the Niagara region, and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Doucette. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk, it's been a long night. Confirmatory bylaw, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 60582414 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its special and regular meetings of March 24, 2014.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Butters. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Members, we're now going to move on to adjournment. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Butters. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Have a wonderful week.